Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. This is your review discussion and spoilercast for Resident Evil 4 Remake. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined by executive producer Dustin Furman. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Monday. We're coming in fresh. I was just telling Dagan, gotten in this habit where I stay up too late on Sundays and then sleep in on Mondays a little bit. Nothing crazy, 9:30, but that's much later than my normal wake up. But that's okay. I was telling him it's kind of nice rolling into the week. And I like recording on Monday too. There's a special freshness to it. I'm very amped about this because in our previous Spoilercasts, not always, but I have a tendency to be the first one done. And then I'm waiting and I'm not as fresh. I finished this yesterday, baby. So I'm coming in ultra fresh on this one.
I think that the same is true for Dagan Moriarty.
Yo.
How are you today, my friend?
That's
co-host
not Chris
of Knockback and
Reagan.
Constellation. No, it's not Chris. Chris is... Who knows what Chris is doing?
I don't know.
What's happening with you, my friend? How are you?
Yeah, man. Talk about exciting.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
All right, Spicoli.
Yeah, man. I was going to go with, I was going to open with a little merchant for you guys.
Yeah, please.
Welcome. We've got something new for you, mates. I can't do a British accent. So you just got to kind of imagine it. Stranger. And I hear you, Dust. I finished it yesterday too, man. I came in at the 0 hour with this, my friends. It's going to be exciting.
I'm looking up. Sorry, merchant quotes. I should have done that.
My new favorite video game character.
Oh, he's great. Did you play the... Well, we'll get into all of this because obviously he was famous from the first one too, but and he's always just talking a little bit of shit, judging you a little bit. I love when you buy the rocket launcher. If you did that, and we'll talk about that, he like basically makes fun of you, which is hysterical. All right. Today we're here to talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake. Like I said, it came out just from the time we're recording this, I think 9 days prior, which is very quick for us because we don't get early ad-free access. We don't solicit codes. We buy the games and play them right along with you at home, as most of you know already, if not all of you. So usually we're a little further behind than this, but I think Resident Evil 4 was, in some sense, Resident Evil 4 Remake was in some sense highly anticipated. I think everyone was gonna play it right off the bat. So it makes sense. And it's also not very long. So it makes sense that we get through it quickly. So we have a lot to talk about here. I have extensive notes. You guys were saying you just beat it imminently. I actually beat it on Saturday night. So 2 days ago. And then actually not Saturday night, like Saturday during the day. And then I immediately started a New Game Plus run on hardcore mode, and I'm on chapter 8 in that now, and it's
insanity.
I have to say it's actually somewhat trivial compared to the first playthrough because you bring all of your weapons in.
Right.
So I'm just destroying, dude. Like they take more damage and do more damage. Enemies stay down shorter amount of time to shank them. Things cost more money. You get less money. You get less ammo. But I have a fully upgraded Blacktail, a fully upgraded Stingray. I'm like just destroying the enemy. So there have been a few moments in hardcore mode, though, in New Game Plus, even where I've had some trouble, where I've died a few times, including the infamous water room in the castle, which we'll talk about later. That was infamous in the first game too. Okay, so let's begin to talk about this. I want to say this, and I guess I'll begin here. And we'll obviously go around. We can talk as long as we want. There's much to say. Resident Evil 4 on GameCube is a very, very seminal and memorable game for me. And there are multiple reasons for that. Number one, my first E3 ever was 2004. And at this E3, Resident Evil 4 was one of the marquee games, along with Twilight Princess, I think, and there were some other weird things too, nonetheless. I have a very firm memory of watching this being shown during a Capcom presser or whatever it was. And what I remember about it is being enamored with the bear traps in it, to the point where one of the editors made a fake GameCube game case for me that just had bear trap on it, because I was like, wow, this is so incredible. I don't know why I was so enamored with this. But you have to remember, this is at 2004, pretty late in the GameCube and PS2 era, getting towards past the midway point. This is still pretty impressive. At the same E3, they showed the game that I always talk about, the shooter Black, which, if people remember, that shooter on PS2 was seminal because it had all destructible environments. So much like Red Faction. So there was there was a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. But this game, from that very point, was something that I was just paying attention to. Plus, I was a huge GameCube fan, and people might remember that the original Resident Evil 4 was part of, depending on who you ask, was part of the original, what they call it, the Capcom 5, which were these Capcom games. One of them never even came out. I think it was called Dark Phoenix or something, but they were all supposed to be GameCube exclusives. This is where, and some of them weren't, some of them weren't. So like Beautiful Joe, Piano 7, I think was one, Killer 7, or Piano 3, Killer 7, and I don't know what the other ones were. I don't really remember off the top of my head. But what's funny about this is that this game came to GameCube very early in 2005. And at the time, and I think people might remember this, Shinji Mikami, who's obviously still famous today, said that he would cut his own head off with a chainsaw if it ever came to another console. I don't know if you guys remember that. That is the exact quote, or pretty much the exact quote. And then it came to PlayStation 2 literally 8 months later.
That year.
Yeah. And it had the Ada Wong stuff on it and all that. Now, I never played that version. And in fact, I never played the Ada Wong DLC at all, or the Ada Wong expansion. And that's not available yet. But the other important thing I want to say before I move on, and we can talk about the game itself, is Resident Evil 4 in 2005, January 2005, came out during a school year when I was at Northeastern, from that summer of 2004 really through the summer of 2005 or into the fall of 2005, where I didn't play games really. And there were 3 games that came out where I was like, I'm making exceptions for this. And this was one of them. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was another. I couldn't resist that. And then I think it was something like the Mega Man X collection or something came out. I was like, oh, okay, I'll have to do that too. But then I came back and started writing guides again when I was a junior at IGN and all that. So anyway, I have just all these memories of Resident Evil 4. And I always considered it one of the greatest, if not the greatest, survival horror game ever. I think that playing through this back to back with Dead Space and Dead Space Remake in some way encapsulates in my mind that Dead Space is better than the original Resident Evil 4, and Dead Space Remake, I think, is better than this game. But, and I need to just say that at the top,
okay.
They are both exceptional. They are both must-play games. They both should be purchased at the top price if you can afford it, because you want to give Capcom and EA, in Dead Space's case, the right message. And I think the one thing that I would see in this Resident Evil 4 remake is that it's pretty true. They make some interesting changes, including to the characters, how characters die, and all this other stuff. And we won't get all into that as well. But I will say that it feels like a PlayStation 4 game ported to the PlayStation 5. And that it looks like one. I think Dead Space is a much more impressive game, technically. I think it runs better. I think it loads quicker. I think it just uses the console because it's based on current gen consoles only as opposed to last gen. And I hope this is the last time we ever see that, because I find that a little bit annoying. And I was kind of flummoxed by the 10s that the game's getting. There are plenty of problems with this game. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not awesome. It is. It's awesome. I went right in and played New Game Plus. I love it. But when I was playing, even a few hours in, I'm like, 10? Like, what are you talking about?
Okay.
No way.
Okay.
Dead Space is a better game than this.
Oh.
All right.
We
now.
We got arguments ahead.
Let's do it.
So, by the way, I want to say this about Resident Evil 4. I'm talking a lot. Resident Evil 4, the first one, doesn't really matter. We can bring it up when it comes up, but it's not really germane to this at all. In fact, I was going to go, I haven't played Resident Evil 4 since the Wii version came out all the way through, which is, I still think, the best way to play the original version because of the Wiimote. It's actually one of the rare Wii games that's like, man, this is awesome, because you don't have to use that clumsy control anymore. But it's not, a lot of people haven't played that game, even though some people pretend they did, of course, with lots of other things. It's like when you go to Woodstock and 17 million people are at Woodstock. I'm like, I don't think so. 100,000 of you maybe were there. So let's get down to it. All right, Dave, let's go to you. Resident Evil 4 Remake. What do you think? I mean, speak about it however you'd like. Let's start at the very top, and then we can get into the nitty gritty.
My God, you guys. I honestly can't remember enjoying something, let's say enjoying a game, while also simultaneously giving it the finger, cursing at it, and threatening its life. This is, for me, now you guys play many more video games than I do, but I would say this is top 5 easily in the last 5 years for me. I enjoyed this game so thoroughly, and everything you said makes sense, Kyle, especially in comparing it to Dead Space Remake. They came out so close together that that's an inevitable comparison that we're going to draw.
Right, which is why I wanted to draw it.
Which makes complete sense. But I think in terms of fun, I found myself looking forward to going back to this game nightly more than most games ever. I would put it up there for me personally with Horizon Zero Dawn. BioShock Infinite.
Say it the way you were going to say it. Little Long Island?
Yeah, Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, I heard it.
You know, I got to represent a little bit, my friend. And, you know, maybe it's getting Capcom points because small tier, you know, dating back all the way to NES, Capcom, think Disney games, Mega Man, Street Fighter, and all the Capcom fighting games, Final Fight. Like, it's so nice to see Capcom in the limelight, you know, and doing so well.
They're killing it. They're killing it, dude.
Oh, my God. You know, brass tacks, that's really what it came down for me was fun. Graphic fidelity and remake and more colorful and better animation and, you know, just improvements orally and visually and everything. Yeah, that's all fine. But I just had so much fun with this game. And I found it to be quite challenging. And I was joking around on Twitter. I don't know if I'm just getting old, if I'm losing a step. I did comment on it. People were like, Dagan, you beat Cuphead. What are you talking about? But I found this game to be a proper challenge. And that was part of me, you know, sort of looking forward to going back every night was like, I got to rise up to this. I got to beat this guy. Or I went back and saved at the typewriter knowing that I got a tough boss fight ahead or whatever. So I enjoyed it. So psyched to be sitting here with you guys talking about it. And there's a lot to talk about. It's
a hard game.
It was hard.
I think it challenges the whole concept, including my own concept, of when action was truly introduced into Resident Evil. And a lot of people say that it was 5. And I think that that's true. Resident Evil 5 is an infamous game for a lot of people because it's basically a third-person shooter. But I think with the mechanics of this, if this game always felt like this, it would have been clearer that this move happened earlier than that. It's just that Resident Evil 4 felt old. So, and there are ways to obviously circumvent different parts of the game. And the opening village section, for instance, which is a famous part of the game, is incredibly overwhelming because you don't know that you're not supposed to win.
Really?
When you start, right? So
yes.
So there's a lot there that challenges you. Dustin, what are your thoughts on Resident Evil 4 Remake?
Yeah. Well, to start, just a little background. I originally played this game on the Wii, was my first experience. Didn't complete it at the time. I think I got most of the way through the castle and then something else caught my eye. But I just recently, late last year, replayed the original Resident Evil 4. So this was coming off pretty fresh for me from the original. And I gotta say, I'm with Dagan. I mean, I'm with both of you, obviously, that this game, I absolutely loved it. I was so impressed throughout it. Just really the moment to moment of how fun it was, the panicked feeling you get when you're surrounded, the scrambling around trying to figure out your next weapon, when you get hit and then you're frantically pressing triangle in order to heal yourself, and then you realize you don't have any healing items left. The way this game imposes stress upon you in a way that is fun is unparalleled in a lot of ways. I consistently too just was it's weird. I felt that the visuals were so striking in one way, and then I think I said this a little bit on Sacred Symbols, is the visuals were really, really striking. And I think just thinking about playing the old game and seeing comparison, that it was like, man, they did such an excellent job converting this into a new 4K or whatever, 1440p upres, whatever, a high definition presentation. Since we were bringing up Dead Space as a point of comparison, and I think that's fair since they're so released so close and so often compared, I agree that I think Dead Space on a technical and fidelity level is much more impressive than this game. The lighting in Dead Space alone, the particle effects in the air, just amazing. Pound for pound, though, I'm going to have to say that I think I vastly prefer this game, even though I really like both. I think the thing that really kept me going, not kept me going because that sounds negative, but just seeing the different environments, seeing the different types of enemies, the way they balance the economy of not only your ammo, but your cash flow, and how you have to balance that out, and how they kind of drip feed you new weapons, and you got to decide, do you want a new weapon? Do you want to upgrade the ones you currently have? Just a lot of really stimulating aspects to this game that I was with Dagan,
yeah,
that I was just constantly thinking about this game when I wasn't playing it. And yeah, I haven't started a second playthrough fully. I think I'm just going to go straight to professional. No hardcore mode.
Supposed to be very hard. Yeah, I don't know if I have it.
I've heard it's not too different. It's not a doubling of difficulty. So I don't know. I'm thinking just we'll see how it goes.
I'm just doing that. I will. So because the reason I wanted to play New Game Plus quickly was because I didn't take notes at all throughout the game, which I usually do, but I just didn't want to because I'm familiar with Resident Evil 4, and I also just kind of wanted to enjoy it.
Sure.
On its own. It's one of those rare games, like actually every Resident Evil game, because every time a Resident Evil game comes out, it's like this for me, is I don't care about the Platinum Trophy in it at all, which is one of those. And so I just play it and enjoy it straight up. And then I want to go back and pick up and clean it. So like on my second playthrough, I'm playing with a walkthrough. And by the way, shout out, I was going to actually email Pear. Maybe I'll do that today. Shout out to IGN's guide for this because it's really good. And their whole wiki format, I don't usually use it because the PSN profiles and those guys have trophy guides that I use, and I don't really need spoiler-filled walkthroughs, but the guide's pretty good. I've been using it to get through and find all the treasures. So yesterday or last night, I got the bronze trophy for getting all the treasures in the first part of the game, and then there's another one for the second and the third. I'm getting those. I want to get all the Castellan character trophies or the little icons because I think you unlock like a new gun and a new knife. But I looked at the trophy guide or trophy list and just knew that there was just no way I'm getting the platinum in this because you have to beat the game, I think, on professional with an S+, which means you have to play professional without New Game Plus. You have to just play it straight up.
Oh, wow.
Like raw dog it. Saying that loudly. And I just can't imagine doing that. I just don't think that I have it in me. It's not quite up to like Wolfenstein 2's Mein Leben, beat it without dying shit, but which I cannot believe people did. Like that game is so hard. I watched a full playthrough of that, and I could not even believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is absolutely fucking bonkers. This game is so hard. Wolfenstein 2 is so hard. So I don't know if I'm going to go down that road, but I will say and we'll talk about it obviously in the course of things here. Is I do almost have the gold trophy from the shooting range. I just need to do one more thing. I just one night I just got sucked into the shooting range because it's so different.
It's hard
than the one in the GameCube version. But it was so much harder, I think, in the GameCube version. I even did one of the challenges S rank right away the first time. So I was like, wow, this is, and I'm not very good at games. So this is 3D games especially. So all right, let's get into the nitty gritty of the game itself. I'll kind of introduce it here. One of the things I like about this game is that it's not really connected to Resident Evil as much as the original games are all kind of mixed up with each other. This game is really a side story where you don't need to know too much about what happened for it to make sense. And actually, this version of the game is much more sensical than the original version of the game as far as the story is concerned. But here's what you basically needed to know is that you play as Leon Kennedy. He was the rookie cop in Resident Evil 2. We did the Resident Evil 2 remake review discussion and Spoilercast back in 2019, I want to say, when the game came out. So I think that we already did something like for that game. But when the remake came out, I should say. So this game takes place with the same Leon, but it's 6 or 7 years forward. It's in 2004. As you'll recall, Raccoon City was nuked. So it no longer exists. The Raccoon City Police Department obviously no longer a need for that. So Leon ends up working for the US government. And he is deployed at the beginning of the game, now a much more grizzled veteran style character with his cool coat and all that. He's deployed to Spain, where the president of the United States' daughter, Ashley, has been kidnapped. And he's off to figure that out. And that's kind of the premise of the game. And you learn that Ashley was kidnapped by a guy named Jack Krauser. And this is much more explained in this version of the game than the last one. Krauser is like a military officer who was instructing Leon, and he kidnaps this girl to give her to a guy named Sadler. Sadler wants to infect Ashley Graham with Las Plagas, which is a parasite that will then allow her to be sent back to the United States and infect the president of the United States. That's basically what the game's about. So Umbrella Corporation doesn't even exist anymore in the timeline, I don't think. I think Umbrella's done at this point in the timeline. But you see, and there hasn't been, Resident Evil 5 is when you see like the new police come out. I don't even remember what the fuck their name was, but this is kind of a space in between. So there's very few Umbrella references, except for the character Luis worked for Umbrella. And you actually do see some Umbrella logos if you look around, which is cool, like in the stonework and stuff. Very similar to Resident Evil Village, which did a similar thing. So that's kind of the premise. I think I hit all the notes there. So Dustin, let's stick with you. What do you think about kind of the overarching story?
Yeah, it can be a little confusing, I think, even at points in this new one. Particularly, the whole Krauser character is really interesting, just in that you see him a little bit when Leon is explaining his backstory at the beginning. And then when he shows up again, you think, who the fuck is this guy? This just random military dude that is real angry. So
a Rolento looking ass too. He looks like Rolento from Street Fighter Alpha. Hardcore.
Yeah. So I think that can be a little bit confusing, but overall, and this game, in terms of both its gameplay and its story, is still very video gamey. And I love that about it. For example, the character of Salazar, who I don't know what's going on with him. Maybe it's explained. I think he's actually a little kid, right?
In the original game, he is a little kid.
Yeah. But he's all fucked up looking. He's somehow in control of this whole castle. It seems very silly. I mean,
they made him into a French aristocrat in this or something.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I dig it.
Kid. I like the foppish, powdered wig kid. I think they should have kept that, but
they took out the whole scene with him and the giant robot thing. Mm-hmm. So they took out some silly stuff, but I love that they still had the giant minecart section that was totally over the top. That was great.
So fun.
But I gotta say, overall, I like the characters in this game. In particular, I gotta say, I really like Ashley in this game.
Yeah, she's great.
She's very cute. I love how she's kind of flirty with Leon, and sometimes she's just really supportive. This is such a small detail, but when you're in the gun range and you're doing a good job, Ashley cheers you on. And I think that's super cool. I love that aspect. The only thing, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, because there's been a bit of controversy around this character, is Ada Wong.
Yeah, bad voice acting.
The voice acting, not so hot.
Not at all.
But here's the thing for me. It's not great. It's probably the weakest performance in the game, but it's not out of the realm of Resident Evil for me at all. So ultimately, it doesn't really feel like a big deal. Now, I saw some things that people were going and harassing that voice actress, which is totally unacceptable.
I mean, that goes without saying, right? I mean,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a minute here? I want to say, but I was going to save this for regular secret, but I want to say this now. You don't have to take out things on people online, and obviously that goes. I think you have to talk to people like adults, and that goes without saying. It's what bothers me actually about these situations is like Resident Evil fans or some Resident Evil fans, stop giving it so much attention. It's like some people losers on the internet.
Yeah.
But I did. It's funny because the Ada VO reminded me a lot of Peter Dinklage in the original Destiny when I was playing that. I'm like, man, this sucks. And then I come to learn, well, everyone thinks it sucks. This was kind of a similar thing with Ada, where there's a specific scene where Luis is climbing, trying to get her hand, and the guy voice actor's putting his all into it, and you can hear, and he's breathing heavy, and it's just beautifully done. And she's like, and I'm like, this sucks. In my mind, before I even knew anyone had a problem with it, I was like, this voice actress is not the same, and it sucks, and then you find out that everyone felt that way. So it kind of felt redeeming in a way that I identified that, but then you obviously don't want anyone to be abused. But then you don't want entire groups of people to be blamed for things.
Right.
Either. So anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just wanted to say all that. It makes more sense here.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else to say as far as the story. One last thing is that I loved Punished Leon. He's great. I love that he's got baggage. He survived a nuclear blast. A girl that he thought was interested in him ended up betraying him. So, and now it sounded like he was forced into this service of the US government, because I think he says the intro that he didn't have an option. So in particular, when you contrast him in Resident Evil 2 and then this game, you see a very damaged Leon. I kind of like that. He's got a nice bad boy vibe. Almost like, I think I told Holly, I said, he's got a Nick Carter vibe, kind of the bad boy of the group. but I like that about him.
Yeah, a little bit of a dated reference, but that's fair enough.
But it's fair enough.
Got it, though.
Yeah, I think it's funny you bring up Ashley as far as her flirtations with Leon, and like they really tamped down the innuendo and some of the just kind of weird shit that was said between them. Like Luis, I don't think barely flirts with Ashley at all. And Leon only says one weird thing, which I think is from the original game when he's like, you must be being chased, being chased by creeps or something, which is an amazing, like weird line. But they really is, I could be wrong. You played it more recently, but I think they cut out a lot of the more flirtations. Obviously people used to try to get Ashley like upskirt shots and stuff. They just totally eliminated your ability to do any of that stuff. So I'm glad that they tamped her down a little bit, or tamped our ability to abuse Ashley down a little bit.
They really did.
Dig, so talk to me about kind of the overarching story and the characters, and from a high level, how do you feel about them?
I mean, but what I love about this storyline is it's very basic. I mean, it's a very bad dude's premise. It's like rescue the president, in this case, the president's daughter. But for as simple as it is on its face, it gets pretty complicated. I agree. Once you involve the cult and you involve this plague, this parasitic thing, and these baddies, it is very sort of operatic. It is very campy. And I think that's part of what makes it really fun. There's really every boss character has their final form, and it is very, I agree with Dustin. It's very video gamey. I think that's what makes it so much fun. And there is a large sort of range in the quality of the voice acting in this, which is kind of strange. Usually I don't find that. And you guys may know better just having played more, but usually I find it's generally pretty good or generally pretty crappy. But there's a pretty big range in this. The guy who plays Sadler I found was really good. Of course, the Ashley voice actress was really good. But and the Luis, he was amazing. But I'll tell you, and I'm usually pretty sensitive to this, I didn't think the Ada voice acting was that bad because of the character, or at least what I got. I mean, I should start by saying I played the original on GameCube very casually, oddly casually, actually, because I played with some of my friends who I knew up in Connecticut when I would go visit them. And there was a very brief period of time of 2 or 3 months where we would play it really casually, almost like a Tony Hawk game, which is very strange. So I was familiar with it, but I never played it through. A lot of it was watching rather than playing because we kind of took turns and we pooled our resources and stuff. But in this remake, I didn't find the Ada Wong performance because she's a duplicitous character, right? She's kind of a turncoat. She's cold. She's unsympathetic. I feel like most of the time it played into what you were getting from the character, which was you weren't really knowing if she was friend or foe, at least for me, because I'm kind of ignorant of the story, more so than you guys. But there were those gratuitous, or I should say egregious action scenes where she should have ratcheted up the performance a little bit just from a humanity perspective. Everybody else is like, come on. And she's very cold and calculated and a little bit too robotic. But for the most part, I thought the story was really fun because it was a vehicle for all the cartoony business and just having a good time and the change of environments. And there's like 3 or 4 different characters along the course of the way where I'm like, I guess this is the big bad. And then he dies. And then there's another big bad. So I thought it was a blast. I think if you're going to do something like this is the way to do it. Just have it, again, fun, being at the nucleus of the situation. But also, I was a little disappointed. I knew this game had a history of being overly criticized for being more action-y than horror-y, if that makes sense. But I think you do sort of trade the horror for the intense, over-the-top action. I was surprised how unscary this game was. I didn't find it, and I'm scared. This is the guy that's scared of everything. I think if you want those vibes and the eeriness, maybe you go to a Silent Hill or a different series, something that I don't think horror games have been done justice yet. But this really wasn't that. That was the only surprise for me, but I happily took it because I just had so much fun playing it. That there was a trade-off of jump scares and actual proper horror, and playing in the dark in my office. I never looked over my shoulder. It was just kind of a lot more straightforward and a little bit more toothless than I thought it was going to be horror-wise.
it's funny because some people, and I kind of agree with this, although again, it's all remembrance, is some people say that this version of the game is actually less violent and less scary than the GameCube version. And I'd have to go back and see pound for pound. I was reading an editorial about this when I was preparing. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I don't know if I thought about that, because I think one of the things that the game suffers from, well, I don't want to say it suffers from, but in the comparison to Dead Space, which again is only being made because they're back to back with each other.
Back to back.
And with the Callisto Protocol as kind of the prelude to all of it, even in just these back to back months, it's very interesting. And the Callisto Protocol, I think, is good, although, and even underrated, but not anywhere near on the level of Dead Space or Resident Evil 4 Remake. But the original Resident Evil games had a very key component that is missing from this game, which is the setting as a character. Now, you can say the setting of the village or the castle or the lab or whatever, these are different. And yes, they are. They're all settings. And I love specifically the village and that whole beginning, just the complete unrelenting brown of the game, I think is so well done. And that was one of the really cool parts of the GameCube game as well, because that's pretty challenging to make things look good with that really drab, earthy color palette. And I find that really interesting, but it doesn't have the mansion or the police station or the Ishimura. And I think typically the best horror, how about we pull out Dega classic we love, the Rosemary's Baby. The apartment building is a character in that movie. It's part of the eeriness of the movie is that apartment building.
Sure.
And the static nature of it. And I think that when you play the first Resident Evil game, which is obviously a classic in and of itself from 1996, the mansion is the main character. And we never really had played something quite like this. I mean, maybe Maniac Mansion, and if you played Sweet Home in Japan or something, but generally speaking, we had never really seen anything like that. And I think that the Resident Evil 2 gets a little bit away from that because it doesn't only take place in the police station, but that's such a key component of the game, like City Hall or whatever the hell it is, and like you're just dicking around,
right?
And so on and so forth. Resident Evil 3 is more of like especially in the beginning, more of like a part of a city. And then in Resident Evil 4, you get to this, which is cool, but I just think it misses that one component of really nailing consistently for 10, 15, 20 hours the same setting and doing it expertly. And I think that's what Dead Space does. The claustrophobia of Dead Space is shared by the claustrophobia of the original Resident Evil, the inability to kind of get out of there. You always feel like you have places to be and ability to move, especially in Resident Evil 4, where even though you're getting inundated with enemies, you're never really trapped or cornered. The game telegraphs everything it's going to do by leaving items and barrels and everything for you out there. So there is a key horror component that is missing. And that's kind of where my mind has gone with it, which is I just don't think at the time, 2005, Colin, or even 2008 when the Wii version came out, or 2007, Colin, whenever that was, I don't think that I was sophisticated enough as a gamer to really realize that it's an action game first. And it's funny to kind of, at least I get these things in my mind, and then they kind of set up to where it's how I understand things. And you look back at things and you're like, this is how I understand it. And I think that's the way it is with everyone. In Resident Evil 5, I have to really check my impression of that game now again, because I really felt like this game felt a little bit like Resident Evil 5. And I was like, I don't really remember it being like this, but indeed it was. So anyway, that's the one thing I wanted to point out, was just that I think it lacks a strong continuous setting, which I think is so key. But I want to start to ask you guys deeper about the opening section, the village. You're in rural Spain, cool setting, killing Spanish people left and right, Spanish zombies. I think this entire premise speaks to the power of language in games, foreign language in games, and goes right back into our Metal Gear Solid 3 conversation where on Knockback, where I was saying, and a lot of people were making fun of me, but I was like, why doesn't the game take place in Russian? Since that's what they're speaking.
Right.
And instead they make it clear with like one throwaway line, like, oh, we're actually speaking Russian, but for the ease of the game, we're speaking English. But I don't speak Spanish, so I have no idea what the fuck anyone's saying in the game. And I have no idea what any of the writing says. There's some writing that isn't translated or doesn't get translated for you on the back of pictures and all that, unless you press a certain button. So there's a certain foreignness that I think, unless you're from Latin America or Spain or a Spanish speaking place, it's going to be it's pretty awesome, because it feels unfamiliar. Like you can't speak to anyone. You don't know what's going on. Leon, when he's going into that guy's house in the beginning and the guy's like all fucked up and just walking towards the fireplace and he doesn't really know what's going on yet, and he's trying to talk to him. I think they do a really good job of setting it up. But again, the overcast woods, fall, brown leaves, black, no color anywhere, no color. There's just none. There's none. Except if you, that's why when you see a green herb or a red box of ammo or something, or when you're in your menus and you're looking at your different gems, it stands out so much because there's just no color. So I really love this beginning section, especially just how familiar the geography is if you've played Resident Evil 4 before. In fact, when you start the game up, they show a shot of the village as they're looting the game up, and I'm like, this is a place you feel like you've been before. So I love this opening, you know, whatever it is, 5-6 hours. Could even be longer than that, depending. It took me 19 hours and change to beat the game, by the way, the first time.
Okay.
So this time around, I'm going way quicker. But Dig, let's go to you. Talk to me a little bit about this opening section in Spain. Obviously, the whole game takes place in Spain, so it's not like only the opening section. But this village is a very rural situation. What do they call the Los Iluminados, and this weird leader character you keep meeting that for some reason will not kill you, but just wants. Could have just ended it really quick and taken Ashley and been done with all of that, but that's too easy. So you have these guys chanting and all of the rest. And I wonder if you guys read the cool little secret about how you can skip the beginning section of the game, which I read and ended up doing. Well, this is a spoiler cast, so I'll tell you is that, and I didn't know this, and this is just attention to detail, man. I mean, this is just cool shit.
I love shit.
There's a steeple in the far background. That bell eventually rings, right? And calls them all to the church.
Right.
You can shoot it and make it ring. And they'll go to her immediately, but you have to like get to a place where you can see it. So you have to like run into the village and go up on a roof. And then you can actually shoot the thing and they're all coming towards you and then they'll just stop.
I wish I knew this.
Yeah. So pretty neat.
God,
but yeah, talk
awesome.
to me, Dig, about this opening, hours of the game.
Yeah, I love the beginning of this game because when I jumped in, I really didn't get it at first. Eventually you get in cue and you get in step with the rhythms of the game and you understand what it's telling you. Sometimes, as you said, Kyle, sometimes you just have to last a certain amount of time. You have to survive. Sometimes you have to clear an area of enemies. Sometimes within a mission, you have some goal or something to get to, like you have to get to a lever and pull it. And so once you understand the ins and outs of the game, how it works, but that first village was a bear for me because I didn't really understand at first what I have to do. It's just about, in that case, it was just about surviving. And the environment, it's colorless, it's drab, it's very primitive. In fact, often in this game, I guess until the later levels when you're in like a proper facility with technology, prior to that, I kept finding myself forgetting what era I was in. You kind of get lost in time. You're like, you forget that it's supposed to be the early 2000s because sometimes it feels a lot older than that. And I kind of love that because it was almost like waking up from a dream. Like, wait, where am I again? Like, what am I doing? So that was really cool. But that was the opening levels for me. I enjoyed the setting, but I think you have a point there, Kyle, too, about making it feel a little too sprawling. Now you're in a village. Now you're in some kind of facility. Now you're in a boat on a lake. Now you're in some sort of cave. I think making it feel too sprawling does kind of subtract the horror in an odd way because it always feels like there's somewhere else to go. Even though these places are scary and fraught with enemies, it seems like, there's always somewhere to escape to. So maybe that open world, that vast world subtracted from the horror a little bit. I didn't think of that, but it is a good point. But those early levels for me were an introduction with how the game's going to work. And for me, employing strategies, like I quickly learned, okay, I like the sniper rifle. Let me fit it with a scope. I'm going to go into an area and start thinning the herd on, stealthy as possible. Maybe I could take out 4 or 5 guys. So once I get in combat, there's a few less dudes on top of me. Or I'm going to camp on top of this ladder and wait for guys to come up and just keep shooting them in the head. Or I'm going to camp inside this window. So when they crouch down, I'm going to shoot the cat in the top of the noodle, that type of thing. And also, inventory management and learning very quickly, like if you're not on top of your health items, if you're not on top of your briefcase, if you're not on top of your weapons and crafting and all of that, buying and selling and trading, then you're not going to make it. I mean, it's not a thing where you could really milk it. And I played it on standard difficulty. So those early hours were a really nice introduction because I felt like until maybe the last quarter of the game, I felt like the middle was manageable once you get a sense of not only what the game wants you to do and how you should play, but also how you kind of fit your gaming style into just surviving and keep it going. I found there was also something in this game which I think detracted from the difficulty a little bit. Once you find out, you could kind of chip away at an area, take some dudes out. They're not going to respawn, leave again, go save, maybe hit up the merchant because you got a few more bucks, then go, so you could actually chip away at areas, which isn't the way I love to play all the time, but I did find it difficult enough where I sacrificed that rhythm and that momentum just for being a little on the cautious side, which was actually kind of fun because we're coming off of like playing the Uncharted series for Knockback, right? Which is a lot more forgiving than this game. So it was a nice, almost old school level of difficulty for me. And that was the first few hours for me. I was like, my God, I have 14, 15, 16 chapters of this. I'm still in chapter 2. Am I going to make it through this game in time to, to talk to the dudes about it? So that was, I like the fact that the game is so expertly and thoughtfully crafted where that beginning section, especially being less familiar with the original, was really educational as much as it steeps you in the visuals and the audio components and how the game's going to feel from an art direction standpoint. More for me, it was the gameplay and sort of ratcheting up my skills to meet the challenge.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think what's funny is that, and it goes back to the point about Jason and Crystal Lake or any of these places, these entities, kind of these games being surrounded by a setting. You're moving so quickly that there's a kinetic feeling in the game, which I like. It feels more like an action horror movie, which is neat, but it is totally what it is. And the game is hard. I totally agree that I was taken aback by how hard it was. I probably died 50 times in my first playthrough of the game. And by the way, I also do the Resident Evil thing. I've been doing this forever, which is I just constantly replay from old saves. If I don't like if I don't like how things went if I took too much damage or used too many items, I'm like back to the auto save and I'll try it again. So I did that a million times too. And the first game I really, really got obsessed with doing that in the Resident Evil series was Resident Evil 0, also on GameCube. And maybe we'll do that one day as well. Dustin, what do you think about this opening section? This gray, misty, windy fall village in Spain. I like it a lot.
So I wrote down a couple of my favorite moments, but I have to say right from the bat, I like how when you're rolling up, it's dark. It is the early hours of the morning. And as you enter in to the village, it becomes light and you are enlightened by the horrors of what is before you. It's a small detail, but I thought that was pretty cool. So I really like the fake out at the beginning for the hardcore Resident Evil 4 fans with the wolf. When you're coming up, normally in the original game, there's the wolf who is in a bear trap. You let him free. This time you see one and he's just straight up dead. Mm-hmm. And I remember that was in, I think, the first gameplay trailer. And so this obviously had a lot of speculation behind it. What happened to the wolf? Are they going to cut this part of the game? Are they going to make the game more serious by removing this really silly interaction? Luckily, it was a fake out because the wolf does show back up later. And I gotta say, I fucking love when you're fighting. Is it the El Gigante or the troll guy?
The giant, yeah.
Yeah. When the wolf shows up, he howls and lightning strikes in the background. It is so over the top, and I love it.
Yeah, remind me a little bit. It's like Crisis Core or some shit. Some weird. Yeah.
It's so good. And I don't know, as a dog lover, having this dog show up to help you, and then once you beat the boss, you can go up and he's Leon says, "Good work, buddy," or something like that. It's a very cute, heartwarming moment that I really liked. This is a random part, but I wonder if it happened to you guys. I don't remember exactly which building it's in. Maybe it's the one where the boss guy throws you out the window or whatever. I walk in the one door and I go to the left and it's a bathroom. And immediately there's a guy in there just hanging out in the bathroom. I don't know if he was taking a dump or something, This was one of the biggest scares for me in the entire game, just because I turned into this room that was, first of all, way smaller than I expected being a bathroom. And then there's just a guy hanging on there. Surely he was taking a dump, jerking off, something. I don't know. I blasted his head off, probably.
That's where he was when everything went down. Yeah, and he couldn't get out.
Couldn't get out until Leon came in.
Figure it out, so he's been in there for...
Yeah, that was a little powder room like under the stairs, right?
Yeah,
that freaked me
exactly, that part.
That freaked me out. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, the dog thing is awesome. I was playing on my headset the first time, and then the second time I was just playing over audio or over the TV because I didn't really care that much in my hardcore thing. But the dog barking was like freaking out Russian treble, and I had to like mute it quickly. They're so... Yeah. I watch like so many. It's like when I watch those predator catcher videos and there's like a dog and they're just barking in the background for half an hour. I'm like, I can't fucking watch this one.
Yeah.
God damn it. How many of those good ones have I missed because of that? By the way, the giant fight, it was funny. It's like subtle, Capcom, because and I guess maybe they were doing it intentionally, but Leon walks past a massive hammer.
I love that.
And says like, good luck getting someone to use that. Like
a little foreshadowing. And the giant doesn't use it. Like, right? He doesn't use that thing. That hammer just stays there. He doesn't use that weapon, does he?
Yeah, I don't actually remember. But it just was like Leon doesn't have any questions about why they have a literal 15-foot blacksmith's hammer sitting here. All right.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough.
Well, right. I think that's worth mentioning is I love the action movie quips from Leon. Of course, this was in the first trailer, which confirmed there was concern that they were going to try to make this game less hokey or cheesy or whatever. Or campy.
I think they realized that was part of the spirit of it.
Right. Yeah. And so there's the iconic where'd everybody go? Bingo. At the beginning. Love that. I love when you quickly take out an enemy and he says next. Like super cool. So
in fact, he actually gives you a lot of audio hints about when enemies are actually dead, because it's sometimes hard to figure it out. He'll say things where I'm like, okay, he's dead. That guy's dead.
That's
like
true.
He's actually dead. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's tells during the boss fights. I think that's the only reason I beat the Ramon Salazar fight, because that conversational thing during the boss fight lets you realize how far along you are, because the anger gets ratcheted up, and then Leon will make certain comments once you get a certain amount of damage on the dude. So it's always it's a nice thing. It's thoughtfully integrated into helping you survive, actually, if you pay attention to what they're saying, which I love.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have two more things that I just wanted to touch on from this opening part. I really love when you get to the church and it's starting to get dark again. And that's when, obviously, it's very freaky leading up to this moment for many reasons. But that's when you start to see the Las Plagas shoot out of guys' heads and slowly start to walk towards you in this creepy church graveyard of all places. I absolutely love that. I love the church inside, too, how it looks. It's all really, really creepy. And then one last thing, the fight with the Bella sisters, which I don't know. I had to look it up. Apparently that's their name, but that's the two ladies sisters with the chainsaws. And I love this part. Just it's the perfect amount of tension, as I was saying earlier, where they don't just throw these two characters with chainsaws at you. They have the other people as well. But it's nice. They throw you a little bit of a bone because you can tell Ashley to hide in
there's a locker right there. Yeah.
Or something.
Like right there, there's a locker, which is very convenient.
Yeah. And so when I saw the locker, I thought, okay, here we go. This is the time for the Chainsaw Sisters. So
did you guys survive that battle by... There were some things like that. That's what I love about this game. You could figure out strategies and workarounds. And, they purposely integrate that stuff, especially if you're pretty weak at third-person shooters like me. I love them, but I'm not that great. So did you guys shoot the locks off the two doors, and then you could just run rampant throughout that area and then sort of entice them to come to like one of those dangling oil lights and just shoot it down on top of them? And so, because I couldn't beat them in that shack, in that warehouse, I had to break free.
Yeah, because I think during that fight, there's a door that you cannot open that is bashed through by the enemies when they come through, and then you can escape through that door, right?
Right.
And then, yeah, you're right. I see the oil lamps hanging and I know what they're there for, but I just didn't.
You never used them?
I don't remember how I did it the first time, but I just beat them last night in the second playthrough. And I was just like, heavy grenade. They explode. Heavy grenade. They explode, fall down again. Then I just walk up to both of them and I shot my fully like pump shotgun. I'm just like, and they both just die. And actually, that was the only time I ever had a glitch in the game in either playthrough, like a true glitch where I had to restart from a checkpoint was. When I was fighting the sisters in the hardcore New Game Plus playthrough, one of them drops a crank that you used to open a door and it didn't drop it. Like straight up did not drop the crank. And I was wondering if it was because I used a grenade and it exploded somewhere onto the map, but it wasn't being shown by the radar. That's one thing I want to say here too, is this game is very finely made. No excuses for, and again, I had a situation here, obviously, but trophies not working or achievements not working, things not unlocking, things not remembering. Like the game is very tightly made. You can just tell because it requires a sequence of events to happen. Even when you're playing a New Game Plus, everything carries over except for the things that would break the sequence.
Right.
So they're very locked in with that. And I just want to say I appreciate and respect that because so many games, and we played it right away, so many games are just broken or busted in some major way, and they didn't do that. So I wanted to say that I appreciated that too. Before we move on, actually, I did want to, because we're talking so much about the aesthetic, and I want to ask more about this. And Dustin, I'll go to you first about this. Is what do you think about the RE engine and the way it's being used here? Now, you would think RE engine, Resident Evil engine. No, that's not what it means. Because Capcom's annoying. It's Reach for the Moon engine, and Street Fighter 6 will be.
I didn't even know
Street Fighter 6 will be running on it as well, and Pragmata will be running on it. Exoprimal is running on it. So there's a lot of stuff there, but some people had problems with the lighting specifically in the game. Someone messaged me to make sure to turn off some luminous setting.
Chromatic aberration.
Yeah, that's what it was, which I did. And I only had what I would consider as one light-based graphical hiccup, which is in the church with the stained glass window. It was like all fucked up for me, even with that off. Like it was just totally fucked up. It was hysterical.
Wow.
They must have since patched that, but like you couldn't even look at it. It looked like a flash grenade went off when you would look at it. It was so weird. But what do you think about the general heft of the engine? And you played obviously at 60 frames, 1440 or whatever it is. I would assume something like that. And that's what I played at as well. Dave, do you know if you played with 60 frames or did you play in 4K?
I didn't touch the settings, so whatever it defaults to.
Yeah, we'll default to performance, I think.
Yeah,
right.
So 60 frames. So yeah, what did you think about the engine work?
Yeah, so RE Engine as a whole, I was particularly really impressed last generation. I think it was really, really awesome. Particularly titles like Resident Evil 7, Devil May Cry 5, amazing, well optimized games, really great looking games. Also, I've noticed this generation, it's been struggling a little bit. Particularly, this game has a lot of really weird settings. In particular, I saw a lot of information on the Digital Foundry video. Apparently, the resolution mode still attempts to run at 60 FPS. It's just does not consistent at all. And then they add additional settings on top of it as well, where you can toggle ray tracing on and off for both settings. And apparently, it's a very mixed result on how well it looks. There's another setting where you can change how the hair works in the game, both Leon and I think Ashley. And that's actually one of the sore spots of this game, no matter whether you play it on resolution or fidelity, is that the hair looks really shimmery in a lot of places, just not quite sharp enough. So, but overall, I think that it's still running pretty nicely. I'd like to see them get the ray tracing stuff worked out, because from what I was seeing, that even if you were willing to sacrifice your frames in order to get the ray tracing, it wasn't necessarily that much of an improvement. But like you said, Colin, based on the state of games recently, I'm being pretty nitpicky because it came out, it was in pretty damn good shape right out the gate, as long as you just don't add any weird settings. Like, for me, you want to give some options to console users, but you don't want to add too many. That's like it defeats the purpose of a console version of a game to add all of these different settings. It's going to fuck with your overall performance of the game. But I heard it was running well on PC. I know this is obviously covering the PlayStation version, but
it doesn't matter. This, I would say, is just whatever.
Yeah. I heard that it ran really great right out the gate on PC, which is good news to hear, just because so many games are coming out bad. In particular, Resident Evil 8, I'm pretty sure had some pretty bad issues on PC out the gate. So overall, though, RE Engine is very interesting. It's a very adaptable engine. Apparently, that's what they also use for Monster Hunter Rise on Switch. So it can really go from super low-end hardware to super high-end PCs. So, and now, of course, they also have it running in VR, which there's the VR mode coming for this game as well. So pretty good, but I think they could catch up a bit.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about RE Engine, and apparently Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to run on it, which is very interesting because that presumably will be an open world role-playing game. So pretty dynamic use of that. Although not unlike Snowdrop and Ubisoft and some other engines that are used elsewhere, obviously, what DICE does and all the rest. Dig, I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if either of you guys experienced this. Did either of you guys play on headphones, or did you played over surround sound, I assume, Dustin? And Dig,
yeah.
Did you play over the TV? Yeah,
no headphones.
I thought the audio was pretty bad in some parts, and I was talking about this actually in on the last episode of the show when we were discussing the game. Someone had written into us on Sacred Symbols and saying, like, I was really enjoying the 3D audio, and I was like, it's funny you say that, because I think the 3D audio is pretty busted in the game. The sound effects are generally good. It's ambient sound is not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's proximity. The game really struggles with this. I don't know why. There are times where the game feels like it feels like zombies are right around. Like, you hear something. The game gives you cues like any other game. The music will stop when the enemies are gone, or the tension will, you'll just know everyone's gone. So you know someone's around, you hear them, but it's like, where are you? Why do I hear you? Like, you're right next to me or to my right. And I look to the right and there's no one there. And a few people had written in after we put the podcast up being like, thank you for saying that, because I was experiencing the same issue. And I was pretty disappointed in that, because I think the haptics on the controller are pretty good, but I think the 3D audio leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, what's the point if it's not going to work right? I need to hear where enemies are accurately. And I think the game has a hard time with physical barriers. So I was clearly damaged by explosives that I shouldn't have been damaged by a few times, because they're exploding above me or a wall next to me. And I think that there's a similar situation with the sound where I mean, that's the way I'm reading it kind of as a layman, is there must be some issue with boundaries with some of these things where the game makes it feel like there's things on top of you when they're really not there at all, when you have to go around and then they're there, but it feels like it's right on top of you. And I found that very distracting. I think that was probably the worst part of the game for me, which is not a huge thing, but it's something. And I wanted to throw that out there. But you guys had no problem with the audio?
It's funny that go ahead, Dust. You go.
We talked about this a bit on Sacred, so I'll be brief so we can throw it to Dagan. But I did have that same issue, even with the physical surround sound speakers, where I had someone above me or someone super far away, and they sound like they're right around the corner or right by you, to the point where at one point I was searching around a room in a castle. It may have even been, and it wasn't the water room. It was one of the bigger rooms where I was searching around trying to find someone, and I couldn't find him, but it sounded like he was right near me constantly. So other than that, those few hiccups, I thought the audio was fine overall. Shout out real quick to the save music on the typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. The doo-doo-doo. Yeah.
Yeah,
really nice.
Great vibes. Yeah,
but
sure.
Dagan, are you like Colin, where you're just raw dogging? Second time I said raw dog on the show. Raw dogging TV speakers.
Yeah, I just go straight up to. Yeah, I don't have a surround. We don't have like a proper surround setup. Yeah, I've never been. I gotta go in for that just to see the difference. It's funny that you guys bring up a point. That's how ignorant I am to sound, and not on purpose, but I really loved the sound design in this game, but you guys make a great point. I really didn't get an accurate 3D surround audio experience from this. And I do think back to my gameplay, like it was throwing me a bit. And I think back to things, there were specific moments that I think worked as far as sound and proximity to your person. I think of those tripwires, right? Those claymores, whatever they are. So you have to kind of know the proximity of those things because you have to shoot them before you trip over them and blow yourself up type of thing. Usually that was okay. But as far as enemies being near or far and being a proper barometer as to what I'm going to encounter in a second, it was definitely off. And I wasn't really thinking about that. I think it comes down to what Colin said earlier. It did really seem like, and maybe even egregious for a PlayStation 4 game, but I think overall this experience did feel very PlayStation 4 like. I think that's a great way to sum it up, and that probably speaks to the quality of the audio too. With this engine, you guys know more about this RE engine, but what are Capcom's sort of core components? What are their selling points? What did they develop this thing for specifically? What's the beef with this thing?
Well, I think it's like it's what every internal engine I think would be, which was flexibility and power. And them not having to pay to use someone else's engine,
right?
So I think sense. I don't know if they probably say the same thing everyone says about their engines, but I don't know if there's anything specific about it. I'd have to go and look at probably the most telling thing you could probably look at is like the RE engine first press release, which would probably be almost 10 years ago at this point, I would assume. And they would probably have something to say there. But like all engine work, I think it's really just done so you don't have to pay,
Right. So then they have their own proprietary system, not to pay outside.
Right. And then they develop their own like very specific expertise.
Yeah, which makes I love that. I love that when it's all in house like that. Did you guys how did you feel about the enemy AI compared to everything you play? Because when I go in, I love my sniper rifles, love my scopes, love thinning the herd. I'm such a coward, right?
Oh, I do.
And I found that it was pretty, not only with the enemy respawning and the game remembering things you did way back and then going back and then you come back and the vase is still destroyed, that sort of thing. But I found the enemy AI to be pretty good as far as my experience goes. Did you guys find the same thing, or did you feel like it was faulty?
For me, I think it was fine. It was a little inconsistent. Like I didn't quite understand the rules, especially with the introduction of stealth in the game, which is new in this version of the game, like the ability to like kind of play it like Hitman in some way. But it really didn't you could tell it didn't really want you to play it that way. And I found it personally pretty hard to get into a rhythm of stealth killing because it just seemed so inconsistent. Another great example is when you're popping dudes with your sniper rifle, which I'm doing a lot in my New Game Plus playthrough because I have a rifle with a scope at the very beginning. So I'm doing a lot of that. Is that sometimes enemies know, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you can just kill all of them and none of them are alerted. Sometimes you kill one and they're all alerted. Yes. So I would say that there are, and again, this goes back into why I'm surprised that the game was garnering 10s. And again, why I think that why numbers are stupid anyway. But I was thinking of other things in the game that are quite inconsistent too. Ashley's AI is worse than it is in The Last of Us on PS3. Where as far as immersion breaking, she's just being seen. She's just running around. And the little things like this, I'm a little surprised about because I think that they're a little immersion breaking and we're 10 years up away from Joel and Ellie being introduced. And,
sure.
And so I think you need to be a little tighter than that. So I think the AI, generally speaking, is serviceable. But again, I don't understand the rules. And so I would often just go in guns blazing because I felt like,
that's what the game wants you to do.
Well, because it reminds me a lot of how I felt about Metal Gear Solid 5 when it came out and why it was annoying to me so much and why I just couldn't play it is because I would be at this map and I would stealthily be like, take like 45 minutes, right? Like doing all these things. And
sounds like me.
And then someone sees me and it's all fucked. And so I'm like, I'm not even bothering.
Yeah, you couldn't have been more careful. The Ashley thing's interesting because I kept finding that she was going a little willy-nilly. Then I have to dispatch her only to call her back so she would tighten up. You know what I mean?
I shot Ashley so many, like probably 5 to 10 times. I actually, there was one time where I just murdered her with a shotgun blast, like because I just turned around and she was right there. Just blew her away. And then I got that like weird gray death screen that you get when she dies. So,
yeah, not good. Good.
I will say, Dagan, you mentioned about the sniper rifle and picking guys off. I noticed a few instances where I would just start into a new area and I would think, I bet you there's some dudes down there that are looking for a bullet in the head. And I don't know if this was a boundary thing. There were certain instances where I would shoot someone and kill them, and no one else around them would react.
Yes.
They're just fine with the fact that their buddy got his head blown
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what I was. There's a part of the game like midway through where you're going down this cavernous corridor with dudes above you throwing things at you.
Yeah.
And you kill one of those and they all know. But I'm like, in the last section, I just killed like 7 of you and none of you know.
Inconsistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know. There's got to be some sort of obvious mathematical rule set to all this, but I don't understand why it's so broken.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing in my what I was noticing is that if I would go a little further into the environment, then it would trigger the attack scenario where they would get mad if I shot them. Yeah. But I was just far enough out that I could take them out and it wouldn't be a problem. Which,
I know what you mean.
It's funny because this, I guess, wouldn't be considered good from an immersion standpoint, but I found it really fun strategically to just go and kill as many dudes as possible before I even walk in. Almost like a Hitman game where you can just kind of snipe them and then kind of deal with anyone else as you get further in.
Or if it's one of those a less wide open place, maybe a corridor or some sort of valley where you could just stealth attack dudes with your knife and stealthily take them, which makes sense. Then you wouldn't alert them. I wonder, this may be giving the game too much credit, but I wonder if it's enemy types that react. Maybe some of them are a little more clean than others, but that might be. I think.
Well, yeah, you're right in that. I don't know. I guess it would have to go into you can unlock the models in the game and see like the individual models using your CP or whatever that you earn.
Right.
And what does that even stand for? I don't even know. Collector's points, I think, something like that.
Oh, that's.
So you get those for like doing different tasks in the game. And so there probably are a bunch of different models that are so subtly different that you don't even notice the difference between them and that they might act in different ways. That's a great point.
Could be.
Because I also felt like there were times where you would kill the same enemy over and over again, no matter how you killed them, they would sprout. But then there were some where sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. So I was trying to figure out how I was specifically doing it. I think sometimes if you kill guys with like total overkill, a barrel or a grenade or something, then they just their bodies seem to explode to the point
where I honestly thought it was random. But that's an interesting point. So you're bringing it on based on the decision you make.
I was thinking that might be it. You know, in other words, trying for headshots or maybe even trying to avoid headshots since that lets the head come up more. Because I was also finding, and again, these are not huge deals, but their inconsistencies is I would dump so much ammo into some of these enemies and they wouldn't die. And then I would shoot one enemy in the head with a pistol and he would just die.
Yes.
And I felt like there were, especially not the sprouting creatures, but the really crazy ones that can eat you and kill you that way. Oof. I feel like I sometimes I would blast them with 10 shotgun shells. I was like, why aren't you dying? Like I have a maxed out shotgun.
Why won't you
riot
die?
gun? I mean, it's like and it's just like not doing anything. And then I restart again. One of my checkpoint restarts to go back, and then just like pow pow with the rifle or something, and it just dies. I'm like, okay, okay, I guess so.
Yeah, it's a pinpoint accuracy. Those guys were horrifying because once their heads blossom, you could shoot them and they take a lot more damage. But once their heads blossom, they're going to eat your head off. So you have to be a certain amount of distance away, and some of the shotguns aren't that effective at that range. So again, the difficulty, but you're making me think more and more of the inconsistencies that may be, gaffes rather than something.
Yeah, I don't know. They probably aren't. I mean, I would actually say that your answer about it being subtle differences between the models or the enemy types is probably more likely, but it doesn't quite read that way. But since we're talking about combat, and Dustin, we can go to you first. I was curious what your guys' kit was. So I obviously, once you get the better knife, I forget where you get that from. There's 3 knives because you get another knife that's like indestructible, but you have to beat the game in a certain way. But there's that mid knife that I have now that I'm using, and I have my armor, which you get halfway through the game, but you can bring with you in New Game Plus. But I defaulted to 3 guns, basically, ultimately. Although I worked my way up to a couple of them and sold the old ones or whatever and got rid of them. But I ultimately settled on the Blacktail all the way, upgraded the pistol, because I felt like it was like the Mario or the Toad, if this was Super Mario Brothers 2, the balanced gun. My riot gun, which is my shotgun, and then the Stingray with a scope on it. Although you can also use the heat seeking or like the IR scope the infrared scope, which is cool with that as well.
Yeah.
So those are basically the weapons I stuck to. I didn't use any machine gun or submachine gun. I didn't use a Magnum pistol or anything of the sort. And I basically just stayed with these guns and just upgraded them because you really do have to make decisions. The one cool thing about the economy, which we'll talk about more deeply, is it does allow you to basically get your upgrade money back pretty much with no penalty, which is cool because there's just not enough money to go around. To get the unlimited rocket launcher, which basically breaks the game, is like 2 million of that currency. So anyway,
God.
Yeah. So what do you think about the I'd actually like to know, Dustin, what your kit is.
My kit, the Red 9 with the stock, fully maxed out with the ticket, was my pistol of choice, just because I'm pretty sure that's the pistol with the most amount of firepower.
Right. It has like kickback, but it has like a lot of firepower.
Yeah. So I really like that one. The riot gun, I also maxed out, and I spent the 100K in order to get the 1.5 damage on that as well. And then the Stingray was probably actually the weapon I used second most to the Red 9 over the riot gun, because I love sniping in this game. I was sniping people all the time. If I saw someone down a hallway, I was pulling out the Stingray, sniping them all the time. But I honestly didn't really feel the need to upgrade the Stingray that much, outside of maybe let it hold some more ammo or a quicker to shoot quickly in succession, just because if you get headshots with the Stingray, it's almost always a one-hit kill, unless, of course, they shoot out the plague or whatever. So Stingray was another one of my go-tos. And then the TMP was another one that was my crowd control gun, that if I found myself totally surrounded, you just pull that bad boy out, spray and pray. So...
Yeah, I never used any of the submachine gun stuff. Like, I just sold the bullets, never bought any of those guns, because we all know that would be like the weakest damage. And I just felt like, and I think the more guns you have on you, the more you're going to basically in the RNG get ammo for that gun. There are times where you get submachine gun ammo because it's just sitting there, or pistol ammo because it's just sitting there, but generating that ammo. So I was like, I really feel like I shouldn't even have this thing equipped because I'm getting ammo for it. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And there's no room for it. Did you max out your carrying case?
Yes, that was essential. That's one of the first things for me. As soon as you see that new case, that's priority number one. Now, Colin, something that we discussed lightly on Sacred, and I'm really curious about for Dagan as well, is the body armor. Big investment to buy this body armor. It is helpful, but the price to fix it, I felt, was just too expensive.
It was jacked.
So the first time that I totally wore it down, I never fixed it for the rest of the game. I said, fuck that. I want to upgrade my shit. I don't want to pour money into this. I already got to pour money into fixing my knife. And honestly,
constantly,
I don't really like how it looks in the game. I kind of like the clean Leon without the body armor.
Oh,
so
God bless you.
I just didn't upgrade it. Dagan, did you buy it?
I did.
And use that at all?
I had to. And I had to constantly upgrade it. I had so many problems with some of the boss fights that I was like, I dabbled. I tried to experiment, but I ended up selling my weapons and sometimes buying them back because I'd be in a conundrum with a boss fight and I just didn't have I felt like I didn't have powerful enough weapons and enough ammo. That was my biggest plight, I feel like, in the game.
Classic Resident Evil quandary.
Super. I mean, super dating all the way back to the first game, right?
Right. Just say no ink ribbons. That's all we're missing here.
Thank God.
Make it even worse.
I was so relieved about that because you don't forget that. You don't forget the ink ribbons.
I still think that's one of the most brilliant mechanics in a game ever. By the way,
so good.
Is the ink ribbon. For people that don't know, ink ribbons in old Resident Evil games, I think they still exist in the remakes if you play on certain difficulties, but you would need to, you can only save when you had an ink ribbon. So like not only was the game incredibly hard, but you basically had a certain amount of times you could save. And if you didn't have an ink ribbon, it's like, well, you're not saving the game.
In this game, that would have broke me. That would have been the one dynamic that would just, I can't do this show.
I think professional mode turns off auto saving. So I think you have to kind of.
Oh, so you have to physically. Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting challenge.
And I think you have to save fewer than 15 times if you want an S+ ranking. Too.
Oh my God. It's brutal. I think it's making me feel bad about myself.
I think people were saying that you save in the chapter, when the chapter ends and it gives you the option to go to the typewriter, you save at those points.
Sure. No, that makes sense. That's a proper challenge. I mean, that would be amazing.
That's why I'm just like, when I saw the trophy list, I'm like, nope, I'll just play it for fun.
God in heaven. I barely got through this on standard mode. And I would play through if I could play as the merchant. That would be fun.
We'll talk about him. We definitely have to talk about him. I mean, I am curious though, what was your kit?
So I ended up between all my bartering and buying and selling and flop sweat at the boss fights, I ended up actually, oddly enough, upgrading my initial handgun all the way. And it was pretty powerful. I was able to stick with that. I dabbled with the broken butterfly for a little while. I dabbled with a submachine gun or two. I dabbled with that friggin' accursed bolt thrower. Even with the explosive.
Oh yeah, I was like, I hated that thing. It was
terrible.
It's awful. Because when I was like, oh yeah, I'll use it to silently nails, because it seemed like a stealth style weapon, stealthy. But it just never seemed to work. Like it never, ever. So after a while, I was like, sold it. And anytime I would get ammo, I was just like, gone, goodbye. I don't want it.
That weapon was such a fail. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the feedback that you get from using it. It's like you don't even know you dispatched a bolt, even the explosive ones, because they don't explode right away. It's like, did I do anything? I'm trying to fight this boss. So that I had to kind of rethink my strategy with that whole thing. And of course, the rifle with the scope, that came in handy for me. And I loved all the shotguns. Like Dustin said, crowd control, especially for the parasite heads and the friggin' shield dudes, the SWAT dudes. You needed crowd control and you needed a spray. At a certain point, at least that's the way I played, especially for the escort missions, which I feel like got pretty tough. I have to also give a nod to the game, which I realized they did more brilliantly than I've ever seen in a video game, is moving in between escort missions and not escort missions. As soon as you're done getting tired of escorting Ashley, you don't have to do it for a little while. And then it comes back. You know it's going to come back, and it does, and you have to get through it and get to the next leg of the journey. But I like the way you're in and out of it. You know what I mean? I like the way they sort of balance that. And a lot of that has to do with your loadout too, at least for me, because those escort missions, whether it's when she's in the wrecking ball or earlier on when you have to do it in the cathedral, like it gets pretty tough. Again, I think a lot of that comes down to controlling Ashley. She's a little uncontrollable.
That's what I there were times where I just wanted to shoot her in the leg and be like, stay here, Ashley. I mean it. Stay here. Like, I put you in the locker. Why are you out? Why are you following me? I asked you to stay here. Why are you saying?
You know what? You make a good point. I don't think maybe it happened once or twice to me. She would get taken away often, and I had to realize, okay.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
But once she was inundated and she had to rest, if she gets hit again, she's going to die. She never got hit again for me. So that was maybe just kneecapping her would have been a good strategy.
Dude, I mean, half the times I killed her on accident was me trying to shoot her captor.
Yeah, of course.
Then I would just take her down. You spray and pray or whatever. It's like, because you're basically, there comes a time where she's getting taken away and you realize you're going to fail. Like you might as well just go for broke and try to get to her.
Yeah.
And once in a while that would work, but usually she would just get taken away. But you would just start firing fucking weapons at her and end up killing her.
So good. I love the tension in that.
Let's talk about the shopkeeper. Obviously, this is I would argue, the most famous part of the original Resident Evil 4, which is interesting but true. And the economy in the game is very interesting. I think that it's pretty well balanced. It forces you to make a lot of choices, and then you can really start to break it open in New Game Plus. But one of the things I love about this, which I think is new here, I don't remember it being in the original, and I think it's because they added these actually to the remakes of 2 and 3, was just the customization of the various jewelry and all of that. I don't think that's in the original one, where you can make them more and more and more expensive. So that's why I didn't feel like there was a money problem, at least for me, because you get way less money on hardcore. And I imagine when you play professionally, you get even less money. And you can, I don't know if you guys got the trophy for it, but you can get items up to 100,000 of the dollars or whatever. And by just putting the certain gems in it and kind of following that guide to use different kinds of gems. And so even though I was spending a ton of money, I actually would constantly buy first aid spray. I would update or fix my armor constantly. I probably spent 100,000 or more on just upgrading, or fixing my armor, but I just felt like it was so essential. And one of the new aspects of this too is that he gives you deeper side quests than you really got in the first game. The first Resident Evil 4, as I remember, had the emblem shooting, but I think that was basically the extent of the optional shit you can do. And you didn't like Spinel or Spinel or whatever you call it was not a currency in the original Resident Evil 4. They did. So I think that's different. Maybe I should have looked, but I think that's true. You guys can check me on that if so. But Dustin, let's go to you. What did you think about the Shopkeeper? Let's talk about the economy a little bit. We talked about the things we bought, but how did you balance treasure and selling things? And I think the game does some really friendly things to kind of telegraph that you can get rid of things. One of the things I liked is when you go to the sell screen, it'll start telling you to sell things that you don't need anymore, which is cool. You used to be able to just release those or whatever, but it's like, you don't need this key anymore, so just sell it or whatever. I dug that the game telegraphed those kinds of things to you. And hey, God bless the auto sort.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorting your shit is so annoying in Resident Evil. I get that it is an art in and of itself and that people enjoy doing it. And no one's stopping you from doing it that way. But I would auto sort my shit constantly. Sometimes I would just press triangle, immediately press L3, and it would just sort it. And then I would look through my things because you pick up new stuff. Beautiful additions. But talk to me a little bit about this, Dustin. Let's talk about the economy.
Yeah. Well, I think that it goes a step further, even where it's not just telling you when your old key items you can sell, but I like that out the gate, it says, it tells you if a treasure can have gems added to it. And there's some that just don't. And it says for selling purposes only. That's just a nice little relief. You can just get rid of this. It's just a nice little bonus money. But I really found myself really trying to maximize my treasures as much as possible. Colin, you mentioned getting the 100,000, which I don't know if it's only possible, but the way I did it was with the crown, where you basically get the crown and then you have to have 5 different gems on it. Yeah. Right. And I like that it explained just plain as day how the different combinations can affect what you put on it. So that felt like something that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it wouldn't have explained to you.
Let me ask you about
something
this.
You'd have to do online and look at a guide in order to see how to actually get the most out of what you have.
Let me ask you about this because it's funny you bring this up. A game you love or the kinds of games you love, like Elden Ring, would never tell you any of this. So why do you think it works here and is so welcome here and not in a game like that? Is it just because of the general obtuseness of one and the general playability of the other? In other words, like those are polar opposites in that regard. And I totally agree with you. I love the idea of telling players what they need to know. So to minimize frustration.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. This is something that I often have to ask myself when I play a game and get frustrated and think, why is this frustrating now? But when I get frustrated in like a Dark Souls game, it doesn't. It seems weird contrasting it. I think, I don't know, for Resident Evil, it just feels straightforward. It's a popcorn game almost. I'm in it for shooting and upgrading and stuff like that. I don't need to. I guess there's puzzles and stuff, not so much in this game, but I don't know. That's a good question that I'm going to have to chew on a bit longer. But I like the way, and I think I said this a bit earlier, so I don't need to go over it totally again, but just that it never felt like you had too little or too much money. And the way that the shopkeeper was spaced out felt really great too, that by the time you got to him again, you at the very least had some more money, but most likely also had a lot of treasure that you can kind of dump out and then really decide what you want to upgrade and how you want to focus your kit. For me, and I already went over the kit, but for me in Resident Evil games, it is essential to upgrade the pistol as much as possible and as fast as possible, because that is the gun you're most likely going to get ammo for, at least that I've found. And so a strong pistol is going to make the rest of the game a lot easier overall, because the less other ammo is just most likely going to be more, you're not going to find quite as much of it out there. So, but yeah, the shopkeeper, he's such an interesting character, because I was just trying to figure out, I was trying to search to see if there's any lore on this guy. He's just kind of this weirdo that hangs out. He's trying to get some treasure. You don't know if he's necessarily infected or something like that. And like you said earlier, Colin, he is not afraid to, jab at you a little bit. He'll say something. If you take a look and then don't buy anything, he'll say, next time, why don't you buy something? Stuff like that.
Now we're getting a sense of your tastes.
Yeah. Or there's another time too where he's like, oh, you smell like a pond or something like that, where he'll just, say you stink, say, he'll call you cheap, basically. And then he'll say fun stuff, kind of like a drunk uncle, where he's like, gun rhymes with fun. I love that. He's just kind of this wild card character. I almost kind of wish you saw more of him, but maybe that's the point. Just kind of a little mystery.
Yeah, he's got
here
mystique.
And there.
That voice, man. Oh, I just love that guy's voice. It's so that was a beacon for me in this game. You see those purple flames, and you're like, oh, thank God. Thank God. Like I'm making this game out to sound maybe a little harder than it actually is, but I struggled. with it, my friends. Shout out to the auto sort, like Colin said, a nod to our OCD. I needed to have it. And I love the economy of this game because, like you guys said, it's thoughtful, but it is accessible. It's not Elden Ring. You could manage it and you could go as far as you want with it. Oddly, with me, I was just making myself laugh as you guys were talking because I had no problem sort of exploring every nook and cranny for a treasure, but there was no way I was doing the jewel encrusted trinket thing. I wasn't going to sit there and put jewel. I don't know why.
Really?
Because
that's so strange. That's why you had no money.
I robbed myself of so much money doing it because I did it once or twice and was like, wow, the sum of this thing is so much more than its parts. And that's why I'm struggling with these boss fights. And that's why I'm going into a boss fight with 15 bullets in my handgun and like 3 in my shotgun. Because I think if I did it again, I would have to do the jewel encrusted bit. For some reason, I just didn't have the patience for it. But I loved that.
I found it quite satisfying, personally. Yeah,
it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Like you said, they kind of hold your hand through it. Satisfying with the sound effects. You hear the tinkle of the jewel slip into the little nodule or whatever. But what I love about the economy of this game, like everything else, you could take it as far as you want. Like you could buy, you could sell, you could trade, you could tune, repair, you could get, do the whole thing with the gaming and get the tokens for that and then get the little marbles. So it's all there for you. I think part of it is, this must really speak to you guys since this is what you guys do for a living, but you have, especially when you're doing a spoiler cast, you have to be timely. You have to play the game in a certain amount of time. You can't savor it sometimes like you want to because you have the discussion impending, right? You have the podcast impending. So you're going to have to go back and make time. But by that time, you guys have 3 other games to cover for next week. So that's certainly my heart goes out to you guys.
Yeah, we try not to do that to ourselves, to be fair. We don't try to operate under. We think it makes for a better show to not feel stressed about playing
more
anything.
Thorough.
I just platinumed Wild Arms 2, which took 50 hours and it came out 23 years ago.
Oof. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the economy, the shopkeeper, all this plays a really key and important part in the game. And it's funny that there is a trophy too for playing the game without ever talking to the shopkeeper, which seems so unfathomable. There's another one for never using healing items either. I don't know how you're supposed to do that. Like, I just don't, because I think there are a few times where the game auto heals you, but not very much. One thing I wanted to ask you guys was about how, and you brought this up actually earlier, Dustin, a little bit, but about how you feel like the game deals with time. The game takes place in real time, presumably, right? I mean, that's kind of your read of it. You're saying he gets there kind of early in the morning and the game is kind of ending 24 hours-ish later. And that seems to line up because there are 2 moments in the game where you're knocked out and unconscious for hours. In fact, I think one of them is established as you were knocked out for like 3 hours. And the other one, so that was when the boat gets flipped over. The other one is after Ashley is saved in Luis's laboratory and then he passes out. You don't really know how long you're out there too, but it seems like it all takes place in real time within a day. I'm wondering if that reads to you guys, because I always felt like the real-time nature of Dead Space read, as an example, as a comparator, reads more accurately because we are in space, and so we have no 24-hour cycle or day-night or anything like that. It's just all the same, so it does feel like it's actually happening especially because you're always in the game too. You're never away from Isaac. So I don't know. Dustin, how do you feel about how the game deals with time?
Yeah, I would say that to me, it read as if this takes place over almost a perfect 24 hours. Because like you said, and as I was saying earlier, when you're first pulling up to the village, it's pretty much dark out. And then the sun comes up and at the end, man, which by the way, I love the end shot of this game with the sun coming up and how beautiful it is. It's just a really nice way to end it. And I know we're not talking about the ending yet, but the action movie sequence of the end is so fucking awesome. So but yeah, I didn't think about the aspects of when basically Leon gets knocked out, but I would imagine that both of those instances weren't too long. But yeah, I think 24 hours makes sense.
Might also make sense as to he's actually sleeping some of the time, which is explains maybe how he's going. So I think they do a pretty nice job, Dig, of representing a full day or so, as Dustin said. What do you think about how the game deals with time?
I think you make a good point. I think the time feels relatively continuous. It feels relatively real-timey, right? And one takeaway, I kept thinking the game didn't feel overly long because I enjoyed it from soup to nuts. I loved it from A to Z. But I kept thinking the game was going to end. It ended up being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be 13 chapters. I just thought 13. It's going to end at 13. And there was 16 chapters, right? Ultimately, 15 or 16?
16.
So that was one thing with the time where I felt like, wow, this game is a lot. You get a lot of bang for your buck in this game. And the other thing about time is just the era, the constant reminder of an era. Like, oh, there's technology. Oh, there's a crane with a wrecking ball. Oh, there's, a laser guided infrared alarm systems, and being pulled in and out of time, because I like the juxtaposition of technology and sort of a primitive rowboat with an engine that looks like it's from the 50s. I like integrating all of that, the whole rural Spain thing. I felt like it was the first. I think about comparisons to Dead Space, right? That's a very decidedly futuristic game, where this one, and I guess your weapons and everything, your loadout is a constant reminder of the era. But that was one dynamic with me, and maybe it's a personal thing, where I kept questioning the era. It was a constant reminder of, no, this is modern day. It feels primitive for a second, but this is modern day.
Well, 2004, but somewhat modern day.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
All right, let's talk about some of the other characters we haven't touched on here. Anyone have any thoughts on Hunnigan? Dustin, I'm sure you have some thoughts on Hunnigan. You want her to be your waifu?
Trying to remember who that is.
She's the chick that talks to you over the radio.
The handler.
Oh, her, yeah. I was surprised when the game was over that I thought she would be in it more, because she's pretty present at the beginning when you're in the village, but then you kind of just lose communication with her throughout. I got to say, I really like how the game handled the radio communication, as opposed to this kind of static screen Metal Gear Solid style where you've got the two portraits side by side. I like that it just kind of was this little square and you could move around and do what you need to do during that. But I thought she was cool. I'm trying to think about other characters. We talked a little bit. Luis. Yeah, I like him. I like that he is on this mission to kind of redeem himself after his misdeeds in the past of working for Umbrella and certainly bringing about some of the problems that are present in the game. He kind of has this that him and Leon are almost two sides of the same coin. They're both kind of edgy bad boys, but Luis got this ladies man, this European vibe that I like.
Yeah, the voice actor I thought was really, really great with him
so
too. And then
good.
There's only a few other characters. Like I think his name is Batoris Mendez. I think he was the mayor of the town, right? He's the guy that you meet who seems to refuse to kill you for some reason. Yeah. He's pretty interesting. We already talked a little bit about Ada and some of the other stake. Who are there any characters that stick out to you that you want to talk about? Of course, Wesker, who we barely see, but he's there.
That's Ada's employer, right?
Right.
The Ingrid character is interesting. Like Dustin said, I thought that character was going to end up playing a bigger part, but it just ends up being, RE4 codec exposition. She turned out to be complete exposition.
Basil exposition.
Basil. Louise, shout out to one of my favorite parts in the game relatively early on with Louise and Leon defending the house from the plague of zombies, all Night of the Living Dead style with the boards. I loved that sequence. I really enjoyed it. Struggled with it, but really enjoyed it. The Louise character was really cool because he's, like you guys said earlier, Leon is sort of a shell of Leon. He's sort of this guarded, I don't know, he's seen too much. He's endured a little too much. He's a little far gone, but Louise was very charming of a character. I like that he not only is he a ladies' man, he's a self-professed ladies' man. That's always awesome. And then the stepped out bosses, right? I thought that Mendez character, I love the way he looked. I love that he was like massive, 9 foot tall, unstoppable monster that just walked, didn't run.
Not unlike Mr. X in what is that, RE2?
Yeah. Good call. And then it wasn't Mendez, then it was Ramon. And then it wasn't Ramon, it was Krauser. And then it wasn't Krauser, it was Sadler. I liked the fact that these bosses seemed like big bosses, then they were just mini bosses for the Palpatine character at the end. With the that's the thing with the Sadler character, right? That Plagueis staff, that staff of like giant snakes, that was really cool. Like his staff was alive. Dug that. Very much.
Little Cobra energy there.
I got to shout out Final Forms, man. Love it.
Yeah. I got to shout out one total extremely minor character, and that is Mike, the helicopter pilot, who one of the things that stuck out to me when I played the original last year is when he gets blown up, there's a super exaggerated part where Leon says, Mike, as if it's his best friend dying. It's so over the top. And when I was playing it this time, I was telling Holly, I said, I think that's Mike. I'm wondering if it's going to be as crazy, which he still does scream out Mike's name, but it's not quite the same level of over the top. But I like Mike. He's going in, he's helping you out. It's one of the few moments in the game where you feel like you have assistance from somewhere. So R.I.P. Mike,
R.I.P.
the helicopter pilot.
That was fun, that sequence.
Oh, I was curious what some other moments that you guys might want to talk about that were interesting gameplay or whatever, and I'll throw it over to you guys, but I have a few that I'd like to bring up. And one is that the lake section I find really interesting because it feels like, and I wrote here in my notes, it feels it wasn't obviously predicated on this because of the timing, of course, but feels like the Uncharted 4 Jeep section, or like that was the inspiration for the Uncharted 4 Jeep section. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that. It just feels like something similar to that. And it's interesting. Resident Evil 4 is linear, but it's also non-linear. When you think about once things are open, you can kind of just backtrack and go wherever you want, back and forth, as long as you're within that territory. So for instance, the early village, there's like all the little radials off of it that you can go and explore. But what was cool about the lake is that it really was just an open section that didn't really tell you where to go or what to do. And there are quite a few parts of it that you never have to go to at all. In fact, on my, I don't know why I didn't think to do it, but when there's a room where you meet Ashley, I think, or you're going looking for Ashley, and there's a ladder in the ceiling, and then you just leave. And I never went back there, but I realized there's like a shit ton of things in that attic if you go back to that, but you have to take the boat across the lake to do that and do it at a certain time. So I really, really dug that section of the game. I think it adds a little something to Resident Evil to give you a little bit of agency and you don't have to get crazy with it. It is a little time breaking because I guess there's nothing forcing you forward. It would be interesting for them to play with a mechanic where you have X amount of time to see what you need to do before the game moves on. But I dug that section of the game. And a couple other things that I wanted to bring up was, you had brought up the chainsaw fight, which I really dug a lot. I really like the almost Left 4 Dead style fight with Luis. I think it's in chapter 5 when you're boarding up the house and trying to survive, and it's on 2 levels.
So good.
Really, really dug that as well. And so I wanted to just talk about a few of those. Any moments for you, Dag, that stick out that you wanted to mention?
I mean, you know what I loved? End of the day, I love the variety. You know, the combat, some light puzzles, the boss fights, inventory management. I felt like it was just a fun variety. Then when you throw in the special stuff, the boat, the minecart sequence, the escort missions, playing as Ashley was fantastic because that's a really something where you have to survive by your wits, total pacifist style. She doesn't have any combat skill. She has no combat skills in the game, so you have to really just dodge and survive. That was really cool. Again, that nod to the Night of the Living Dead section where you have to board up the house. What fight was really cool? The boss fight with the two giants. You're sort of battling them in the round. I don't know if it was an arena. It was some sort of circular formation where you're trying to do the trap door, but they keep moving out of the way.
Yeah, one of them has like a helmet on, right? And one of them doesn't.
Yes, one of them's easier to defeat than the other one. That was really fun. That one escort mission where Ashley's in the crane with the wrecking ball and you have to defend her while she's destroying the wall. I thought that was really fun. There was just a nice variety. I felt myself pining for the combat sections, but it was nice to have a little bit of everything because then you look forward to getting back into the fight. This game really just had that in spades for me. So, and it's a game, like the best of these experiences. It really is a game built on moments. And I think that's why I came away so joyful. It's kind of sad to see it end because I don't know if I'm going to have time right now to go back to it, but so good.
Yeah, it's funny because if the game is missing something from its moments, is that I find that the cool moments become fewer the further into the game you go, because much like a lot of horror, and I think Resident Evil kind of suffered from this always in most of the games, is that once the science, like the Umbrella style, we got to do something, now we have an answer and we got to act kind of thing, then I'm like, I don't know. At that point, it's not fun anymore to me because there's no more. Well, I don't want to say that. That's not true at all. It's still fun, but the story itself isn't really as memorable anymore because it's not that the mysticism is dispelled. You always know there's more to it. You always know Raccoon City and all the shit happened, but I don't know. I find once they get to the lab and it starts getting with the science and they're fucking around with their bodies, I'm like, the moments from there end for me. As far as like the cool moments, I mean, it's still a very solid, very, very fun game all the way through, but I think it's strongest in the first 2/3 of it or so. Dustin, what do you think? Any moments you wanted to call out?
Yeah. So I love the wrecking ball section with Ashley in the giant machine, and you're trying to make sure that she's safe, and you're trying to hit through this door. I don't know, for some reason her operating that machinery, and I think Leon asked her how she's able to drive it or operate it, and she says, "Haven't you heard of driver's ed?" It's like the dumbest thing ever. It's like, that doesn't make sense at all, Ashley, but that's okay. I thought that was a fun section. I think it's worth talking about briefly some of the boss fights in this game, because I thought about this a lot, because in some ways I love Resident Evil boss fights. I like that there are very particular strategies behind them, certain areas that you have to shoot, certain ways you've got to hide. I like that instead of just being a big bullet sponge. At the same time, though, I found some of the bosses in this game kind of frustrating. And this is something that, like with what we were talking about earlier, in that I'm okay in a Souls game if a boss can 1 or 2 shot me. That doesn't bother me because I feel like I have agency over dodging it or avoiding it. There were certain instances in this game where a boss could just grab me and kill me instantly, and it made me mad. Like, I had no control over the situation, which obviously you do. You don't want to get too close, or else they might grab you and kill you and rip your head off or whatever. But I don't know, that type of, I guess it's not a cutscene, but you know what I mean, where you lose control for that section and you're just dead. That annoyed me. I will say the Krauser fight in this game is probably my favorite boss fight overall.
Metal Gear Solid vibes, dude.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that you're up top of this like big circular arena. You've got to climb up the ladder and make sure you avoid his attacks and shoot him. It's a fun fight. They took out the part at the end where he has the bomb though, and you have to run out of the arena, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I know that we weren't focusing too much on the original, but there's that whole boss fight with the weird I looked up his name because I don't think they actually say it in the game, but it's the U3.
Oh yeah, that's not in this. Yeah.
Yeah, they totally took that out, which I think I understand.
Go ahead and explain. I interrupted you.
Yeah, what is that, Dust?
So there's this boss fight which takes place in basically a miniature maze type area that is suspended in this cavern. I don't really understand why there's this thing here, but I'm pretty sure that you can't damage him or hurt him, but you need to distract him and run around the maze and unlock the next section so you can proceed. And then eventually the maze just drops and he dies. It's kind of a frustrating fight, but it's also one of the most intense, scary parts because you feel very defenseless in the original. But yeah, they just totally took that out. One last thing when it comes to bosses, guys, and I must know, did you guys kill Verdugo?
No, I don't know who this is. There's a trophy for it, right? And I don't. What is this? What did I miss here?
He's the guy that you have to turn on the. I don't know if it's some kind of cold chemical spray from the ceiling.
And he's following you the entire time. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know his name.
He's tough because he follows you everywhere. You got to hit him with the spray, and then you blast his ass. You just fucking blast him you blast his ass as hard as you can.
Blast his ass hard.
I escaped in the elevator. I could not beat that guy.
But that's the thing is that you have to go. There are multiple stations where it sprays stuff on him. You have to go to each one and then repeatedly, like I said, blast his ass over and over. He loves getting his ass blasted. You got to do it as many times until he fucking dies from the ass blasting. And it's tough. I was insistent that I had to do it. I refused to proceed until I killed him, which eventually I did. But it was pretty tough, and it's a pretty intense moment. Also, by the way, while we're talking, I'm really not trying to overdo this ass blasting joke, but it made me think of the fact there's the guys that you need the thermal scope for that you have to shoot the parasite in their body. Right. Let me tell you, those guys got a little bit of a dumpy on them.
Yeah, people have been putting screenshots out there. They got some big asses on them.
Make you feel something.
Yeah,
that's good.
A couple other moments, and we'll talk about the ending here in the last fight. But I just was reading my notes. I forgot to bring these up. There's a part late in the castle when you're in a labyrinth outside, which I love. I love labyrinths.
Oh yeah.
And like outdoor hedgerows. I just think that shit is so cool.
Yeah.
The dogs are like kind of creeping around. Again, the audio doesn't really do a great job of accompanying that moment, but I really dug that moment a lot. And another cool moment is when you're going and getting an item and then you fall through the wood. I think this was brought up earlier, and you fight the dude with the claws.
Yes.
And he can't see. And there's a shot, one of my favorite shots of the game. It's actually a really cool moment overall. He wakes up and the guy's like chained to the thing, and his eyes are just stitched shut, and you see his face, like a close up of his face with like staples or pieces of metal. I'm like, this is a dope, awesome design. And then you kind of just run away from him, and all those things are hanging from the ceiling, and you're slinking around, and you have to kill the thing in his back. Really, really thought that was a super fun moment as well. And I try to do it in all different ways, trying to be loud and just blasting. And there were times where I'm like, how did you see me?
I know. Come on. You can't hear that.
but I dug that a lot as well. I thought that was a really cool design. And there's a cool part because just a cool little moment there. Ashley, before you fall through the ceiling or the floor, Ashley is like talking and you hear these animal noises, and she's like, I wonder if they keep animals here. And then you fall through, you fight the guy, but Ashley never knows because when you come back, he lies to her.
Oh.
So it's kind of, and I only caught that the second time I was playing. I was like, that's kind of cool. He's like, oh, it's just the animals, like you said. Like he never even tells her that he fought this fucking Wolverine style creature with stapled eyes, which I thought was interesting.
Fine.
Well, that's a reoccurring thing where you'll have a crazy combat encounter where Leon is stabbing dudes. There's brains being shot out over the place. You're getting attacked. Someone maybe stabs you with a pitchfork. And then it'll be over, and Ashley says, Leon, are you all right? And he'll say, no big deal. And I always would say to Holly, it's like, yeah, I just had to fucking murder 8 people. No big deal.
It's so John Wick.
He's so tough. He's awesome.
There's a cool flirtatious line, too, in the castle where where they're jumping over. He's jumping over the chandelier, and she's like, "You're jumping over chandeliers? Who does that?" Or something. Yeah, that's very cute. A lot of really good writing. You want them to get together. In fact, I feel like Ashley's almost begging Leon by the end, even though she's not saying it. You know, like, just do it already, Leon.
There's a little romance brewing. I just want to, before we get to the ending, I have to. Yeah, I'm very proud of myself. I want you guys to be proud of me for this. And this is about how you could take your old man and leverage it for something newer, right? Because I can't shake the old school video game mentality. I'm an old guy. That NES mentality of there's got to be a workaround for this boss fight, right? There's got to be like the sentiment of there's got to be a safe zone that I could exploit here, something broken in the game that I could find out because I can't do it otherwise. And again, that Ramon Salazar fight, I love the character. You know, sort of that George Washington meets Igor, whatever the fuck that guy's supposed to be. Yeah. Super fun. I do prefer him as a kid, but I don't know why the decision to make him scarier. Into I think so. I think it's creepier. I think it's just more fun. But that was a weird decision. But I honestly had a moment with that boss fight. I think because I was so underarmed, and it was like I have this much stuff to make this work. This many things for healing. I have a first aid spray and maybe a vial that I crafted and a little bit of ammo for 2 guns. How am I going to do this? I thought I was going to give up. I thought I was going to be like, I can't do that. I just can't do it. I found a safe zone because if you guys remember that fight, he'll eat you. He'll kind of grab you, throw you up in the air and just bite you and just devour you in one. It doesn't even matter how far into the fight you are. There was one staircase. If you're standing on the slant of the staircase, he'll come down and try to eat you and he can't. He just can't reach you, I guess, because of the incline. Nice. That's the only reason I beat it. So I found an old school NES sort of safe zone in a new game. I think, I found something broken.
We're probably going to patch it out now. Just like to do everything.
There was no way I was winning that without it because I was just had nothing to work with.
That's why when games are exploited, like really exploited, people rush so quickly to exploit them because they know it's going to be fixed.
It's going to be fixed.
It was different back in the day.
Yeah.
Way different, which I find so fascinating and disturbing in some way because I think that's why developers are happy to release games that don't really work. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the ending. Now, I'll admit here 100%. End of the game, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to buy the grenade launch or the rocket launcher, the RPG, and I'm going to kill this thing in one hit. And that's exactly what I did. So,
yep.
Because I was just like, I'm going to reward myself. I got to be honest with you, and we'll get into this later because I have an idea for a podcast I want to do about like gaming confessions, but I don't really like boss fights. I in 3D games, I don't really like them.
Really?
And they're fine. I think they're essential in 2D games, like analog style games. I think 3D games, it's like the Uncharted conundrum. Do you want like a Lazarevich style last boss fight, or would you prefer something like at the end of Uncharted? Well, I don't even want to spoil it. Never mind. But more soldiers and all of these kinds of things. And so I just boss fights are not what I really look for in games. I like the adventure. It's very similar to people saying it's the journey that counted, or all of the rest. You watch this whole TV show and you get to the end and you didn't really like it. Well, it's the journey that counted, and that's kind of how I've always felt. So I wasn't really interested in fighting this boss. I just wanted to be done with the game and see the ending. So I just bought the rocket launcher and fucking killed him. Dustin, talk to me about the last boss and the ending.
I did the exact same thing. I thought it's funny. We had the exact same thought process where when I played the original, I used that on I'm trying to remember which boss fight I used that on. The kid Salazar was when I used that. I used it on him, cleared that up. So I didn't have it on the last fight. Damn, this one I made it all the way through. And I thought, why not? Let's just try. It's kind of fun how it just totally is broken. Which you still do have to do the final sequence of the boss fight. When at least I did when I used the RPG on it.
I did the opposite where I killed the first phase normally and then I used the RPG on the second phase.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I used it first and then had to do that final sequence, which luckily wasn't too difficult at all. But I got to say, and I said this earlier, but shout out to this awesome, totally over the top action sequence on the water ski at the end where you're trying to escape. There's giant parts of the mountain or in the cave just crumbling down. You're going off ramps, trying to avoid. Eventually, you get out into the open air. I love it. It's such a fantastic, over the top for a game that I think increasingly goes over the top. And it's, this game's an action game over horror overall most of the time. So to go balls to the wall at the end and have this over the top action sequence was fantastic. I loved it.
Dig, what did you think of the end?
You guys with your rocket launcher, I couldn't afford that. I couldn't afford a fraction. I couldn't afford like the trigger from the rocket launcher. Now, when you guys did it that way, did it still play out the same with Ada giving you the super rocket launcher to, strike the killing blow, or it didn't do that for you guys?
It did for me.
No, it did for me
because.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So ultimately, you still had to use that red tipped rocket launcher.
Yeah, like I think it ends like that no matter what.
No matter what. Okay.
Which makes it extra funny because she's like, here, use this. And in my game, it's like, I just did.
I was using this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I wish I could have done it that way. I got through that fight by the hair of my teeth. But not only that epic action ending with the jet ski, but the countdown timer. It's my dream come true. I love a countdown timer at the end of a video game.
Yeah, just like Super Metroid.
Just like Metroid, my friend. I love it. So, and just again, like Dustin's saying, it's popcorny, and it really is. It's such an accessible game. It's so fun. The only thing, and this is a different beast, and of course you're basing this remake on a pre-existing entity. You could only go so far with changing it, but I want a horrifyingly horrific, scary horror game. I want it. I just want it. I know back in the day, Kojima was doing it before the Konami debacle with the PE thing, and it was supposedly in the works. But I really don't. You guys just want a scary horror game, like something so frightening? Because think of the most frightening movie and compound it because it's interactive. It's already by its very nature scarier. So why? And maybe you guys know of a game that fits that description, but I don't know any.
I mean, I don't think any game is truly horrifying. I think Dead Space I think actually games like BioShock might even be scarier than games like this in some real sense. But I don't know. I in some sense, I think Dead Space is the scarier game. I don't know. Out of Resident Evil games, the first one's probably the scariest, or the second one.
I agree. Yeah, maybe two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just the claustrophobia and the inability to get away, and also the briefer runtime, I think lends a lot of credence to horror and to fear. But I agree with you. I think probably some reasons have to do with ratings, because if you get an AO rating, they won't sell your game on PlayStation or on Xbox or anything like that. So I think you have to be kind of careful. I mean, not that really matters, but games, you get away with a lot more in movies and TV than you would in games as far as certain content. I don't know why that necessarily is. So I assume, and I think they want people to play their stuff too, so they don't want them to be too put off.
Sure.
But that's an interesting point. But I like the end. Obviously, Ada betrays Wesker, which is pretty cool. And I think it happens a little differently in the original, the end of the original
does it?
game.
I'm not sure.
But I don't remember quite.
Have you played 7?
Yeah. No, I haven't. I should have said that earlier. I haven't played Beyond 4. 7? Is 7 or 8?
7 is the first person one.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I haven't. Yeah. I haven't played anything beyond 4.
7 awesome.
Is pretty creepy. I'm not saying it's the scariest game ever, but I would say it is significantly more scary than.
Oh, I'll check it out.
Takes place in Louisiana.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
The Bayou.
In the Bayou, yeah.
Nice.
Also, Dagan, if you're looking for a thrill in gaming, if you feel like games aren't scaring you anymore, obviously this is a very big investment. But playing a horror game in VR changes everything. For me, at least. It can take a game like Resident Evil 8, which I think is pretty mild overall. There's sections of that game I think are very scary. But as soon as you put it in VR, it changes everything.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, it's awesome. It can be a bit too much for me, but it's cool.
Baby for that. I don't know if I could handle that. I'm asking for something I can't handle right now. Like, no, give me scary as possible. And then I'm like, no, I would never do a VR game. I think I'd be horrified.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into closing comments here and leave it. Dustin, let's start with you.
Closing comments. I absolutely love this. As I said earlier, I am so happy overall, just in that over the past few years, we've gotten a lot of these high quality, attention to detail, high effort remakes of some of the greatest games of all time. Final Fantasy VII, Dead Space, this, and I love that. I think that as much as I love new IP, I think that we're at a point with gaming where I love this idea of taking these classic games that maybe aren't necessarily approachable anymore or have some issues and going and making these awesome, high quality remakes. And this is just another fantastic example. And Capcom over and over just giving us insane quality with Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and now 4, the remakes. And I'm curious where they'll go next, because I think we talked about this a little bit on Sacred, is that there are many different options. They could remake the first game, they could go Code Veronica, they could go Resident Evil 0, or they could theoretically go and remake 5 now as well. And that's going to be a bit of a more interesting territory as when we get to 5 and 6, where these games become much more mixed as far as the critical reception of the originals.
I never played 6, which is
me neither.
It's the only Resident Evil game I've not played and beaten.
I love this idea of them going and redeeming the negative aspects of these games in a more modern lens. So just shout out Capcom, just being on their A game right now with pretty much everything they release. I feel like even if you're not into it, something like Monster Hunter, it's amazing how they've been able to bounce back from a much darker time in the late PS3, early PS4 era and see this arc of nothing but awesome games.
That's kind of my closing comment too, is, and I'm glad you brought it up, is just Capcom. I remember I've been playing games for a really long time, like 35 years. Capcom has been a part of my life for my entire life, and I'm obsessed with some of their games. I mean, my dogs are named Rush and Treble. So I really was sad during that. It really began with Inafune, right? Talking Keiji Inafune leaving Capcom and talking a lot of shit. And Iga leaving Konami and kind of having a lot of consternation. And those guys obviously being on very different trajectories now. But there was a really low point in Japanese gaming. And it seemed to be shared by the consensus of Japanese developers and publishers. It didn't seem like it was anyone. Nintendo was kind of fucked up. PlayStation during this time was pretty fucked up. In the early PS3 era, of course, which is still one of my favorite times to cover PlayStation professionally. But it just seemed like everything was out of sorts. Certainly Square Enix was out of sorts. Certainly Konami was starting to fall at this point. Tecmo Koei, Bandai Namco, everyone was kind of mailing it in. And I think Capcom represents the overall triumph of modern Japanese gaming. The era of so-called crapcom, right? Like 15 years ago that people used to say is not a thing anymore. And I know people associate that stuff with games I don't even really dislike that much, like Dead Rising and others. But the reality is that Capcom went from the doldrums to becoming once more one of the most consistent, high quality publishers, selling more games than they have ever sold, ever. I mean, Monster Hunter is fucking huge. I mean, it's huge. It's bigger than Street Fighter. I couldn't believe that. I was on a recent quiz show online with games, and it came up on something, and it's like you would think it was Street Fighter 2 that would be the best-selling game, or the Street Fighter series would be the best-selling game, but I think Resident Evil is at almost 150 million units sold. That's no joke.
Whew.
So I'm with you there. I think Resident Evil 4 Remake is awesome. I think it's highly worth your time. I think it's an incredible joy to play. I think it's got some problems, and I think it feels a little bit like a PS4 game even on PS5, but that's okay. I think the original, the GameCube version is a classic game. I think that this, very similar to what you were saying about Final Fantasy VII, although not nearly as reworked as Square Enix did with that, but they reworked it enough where it feels modern, and it makes, and here's the thing about Resident Evil 5, and I think this is an important point, and it really makes me want to go play it, which is strange because I've never felt like that about that game. I wrote the strategy guide for it and never went back to it.
Oh, wow.
Ever again. But the problems Resident Evil people had with Resident Evil 5 might have actually started here. And for some reason, we didn't really see it. No one ever really talked about it. And I think that should Resident Evil 5 get another look, and I think it probably will. I don't see why they would. I don't know why you would stop at this point. Is that they're able to fix some of those things. The one thing they're not going to be able to fix, though, is that you kill hundreds of black people in it, and that drove everyone insane. So,
my goodness.
But for some reason, the Spanish thing didn't bother anyone with the GameCube Resident Evil 4. But when the game went to Africa, everyone was having a heart attack. And I'm like, well, what did you expect was going to happen here? I don't understand. So I think that honestly, if I'm being totally candid, Dustin, that is going to be the hardest thing for them to deal with is the setting. Because I remember that clear as day, and that was in a very different game industry that didn't really complain about that kind of stuff. I don't know how they're going to get around that, but I think Resident Evil 5 might deserve a new look because there's more Resident Evil 4 in Resident Evil 5 than I thought, or maybe it goes the other way. So I wanted to say that too. Bravo to Capcom, and bravo to Resident Evil 4 Remake, a really, really wonderful game. Diggin, what are your closing comments and thoughts?
I love the way you guys summed up. First of all, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
It was awesome. I so enjoyed the game. It was such a nice respite and just something to really kind of dig my teeth into, dig my meat hooks into. But it is going to be interesting to see where Capcom goes, right? I'm cheering for them. I've been cheering for them since 1987. It is kind of touching, that we have this heritage with this company that means so much to us dating back to when we were kids, and that they're still at it, and that they've had this renaissance, which is amazing. And, the notion of dare to do something new is something that speaks to me, not just with games. It's like, I think Akira Kurosawa said this. I think I was just reading this quote, actually. He said, dream new dreams. Don't keep regurgitating the old dreams. When I think of the idea of a remake, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, you know what? Develop something new. Be brave. Be bold. Maybe you'll create a legacy for kids growing up now. But these remakes are so good, starting with RE2, which was one of the first games that we covered for Knockback and how wonderful that was. Now RE4. We just did Dead Space remake. I haven't played Final Fantasy VII yet, but Final Fantasy VII is the king of the remake as far as I'm concerned. Which I cannot wait to get to that because I love that game so much, the original. But if it keeps going like this, it's inescapable and it's irresistible. I mean, if you keep doing games like this, and it does make sense to sort of breathe new blood into something and new life into something that is old enough, whatever that age is. And maybe it's different for each thing.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think video games are unique. I know that there's a lot of people are consternated and upset about the remake situation. And I've even been so as well. But the reality is manifold, right? Like number one, these games are not in playable condition. A lot of these games are in 4:3 running on old hardware. They look like shit. They're in 480 at 30 frames a second with this horrible polygonal look. The games simply do not stand up.
Right.
Much like the video games are very unique compared to other media. And it's you're never going to be able to paint Monet's paintings would not be better on different medium, right? Or at a different time. They are what they are. With the exception of some recording quality, and this is especially true before World War II when it just sounds like awful, but you can go in and people do remaster their music and re-release them and remix everything and all of that. And that's the best you can do with music. But modern music is pretty much in the best possible form it can be in, and it's never going to be any better than this. If you have a FLAC file or anything in really high quality audio and headphones and speakers, nothing's going to make that better than it is right now. And books, obviously, time immemorial, but games are an ever-evolving medium. And I think it's important for people to understand that Capcom and others are getting their games into fighting shape for the future, because they're never going to have to remake Resident Evil 4 again. They would be stupid now to remake Resident Evil 4. And by the way, people say, well, why would they ever do? Of course not. Dude, in 10 years, Resident Evil 4 Remake's going to look old.
Yes.
I don't know what you want me to tell you, but they've put it in a position where these games are at least playable. And I keep saying PlayStation 4 is a permanent console. And what I mean by that is that games that run on PlayStation 4 will run on all of PlayStation hardware now forever. I mean, that because it's all built for that. It was not built for that before. And so getting games just even on PS4, like Atlas did with the Persona game re-releases, and like Capcom is going to do in a couple weeks, releasing the Mega Man Battle Network games on PS4 and all of these different things. It's like they're getting games onto these platforms and they're going to be there forever, and we're never going to have to deal with this stuff again. So in my opinion, embrace the remakes, especially when the remakes aren't coming at the sake of new games, because during the remake era, we got Resident Evil 7 and we got Resident Evil 8, and we're going to get Resident Evil 9.
Yeah, good point.
So it's not stopping them. They want to do all of it. And so 5 will come out and 9 will come out and 6 will come out and 10 will come out. Something like that. I'm positive that that's probably the way it's going to go.
So smart. And such a smart strategy.
And then you look back at it. It's kind of similar with The Last of Us Part 1, although it's not even that because The Last of Us was already on PS4. But you're just getting it in fighting shape. And then you leave it. I just think people need to check twice when they're like, oh, just re-release Resident Evil 4. Really, dude? Go look at Resident Evil 4. I loved it on GameCube. I was all over it. I was so far up GameCube's ass, I came out the other side of it. But I think that generally speaking, we have to, as long as it's not, and Final Fantasy VII, again, the king of the remakes. As far as they're like, oh, we're not going to remake it. Like it's literally going to be totally different. It's basically a new timeline, like a new what if. And that's the most brilliant part of all. So I think we can have it all. And again, we're going to get Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 and Final Fantasy 16 within 6 months of each other.
That's brilliant. Very exciting. And so smart because you're covering all your bases. You're playing to nostalgia. You're playing to something new. You're doing everything. You're leaving no area for complaint. People will find something. But for me, you're leaving no avenue for people to gripe.
Right. And I also think with Final Fantasy VII, it's especially interesting because it's a lot of the same people. So even the same writer, right? So you're letting them, it's like their story to begin with. It's the whole conundrum Dagan and I have discussed about George Lucas fucking up Star Wars. And it's like, well, he created Star Wars. So he can fuck it up, I guess. I think Resident Evil 4 Remake's a little different because Mikami has not been at Capcom for years. After Resident Evil 4, I think he ultimately went, well, I mean, Platinum didn't exist yet, but ultimately a few years later went to Platinum and then made Vanquish, which is one of the very best games of that era. I mean, Vanquish is so fucking good. And Vanquish on PS4, you guys should go play that as well, although it started on PS3. What a game that is. And then, of course, he went to Tango, where he made The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2 and produced Ghostwire Tokyo, although he's a free agent again, so who knows where he's going to come. Some people think Sony will throw money at him. I wonder. We'll have to see.
Wow.
All right, my friends. I appreciate your time. Thank you guys for taking the time to play Resident Evil 4 Remake and talking about it here on Sacred Symbols Plus. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support, being with us here today to discuss this awesome game. Hope you go out and enjoy it yourself. Hope you're not listening to this before you've done so. But by now, it's far too late. And even if you did, go play it anyway and show Capcom some love and support because this is good shit. Japanese games are part of our heritage, and especially gamers of my age and Dagan's age. And to see them, that's all we played when we were kids. We had no idea, but that's it.
That's it.
And so to see them, that society and that way of thinking and that creativity and all of it is at the very heart of how we understand video games. And to see a powerful Japan and a powerful Capcom is only good for video games. So much more important than, frankly, a powerful United States in video games. Because without a powerful Japan, we would have never even had the video games as we understand them. So on that note, let's leave it. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.